I still hear my own voice in the static sometimes, warning me about things that haven't happened yet. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been driving 18-wheelers across this country for 32 years. Started when I was 20, fresh out of community college with a business degree I never used. The road called to me then, all that open space, the freedom, the steady pay. Now, at 52, I know every truck stop between Los Angeles and Memphis, every way station that runs slow, every stretch of highway where you need to watch for cops hiding behind overpasses. I drive nights mostly. Less traffic, better fuel economy, and after 3 decades, I prefer the solitude. My rig is a 2018 Peterbilt 379, cherry red with chrome details I polish every Sunday. She's got over 800,000 miles on her, but the engine still purrs like she's brand new. The CB radio is mounted just above my left knee, a Cobra 29 with weather band, channel 19 for truckers. But I scan the frequencies when the road gets long and the coffee stops working. The night it all started was October 15th, 2023. I was hauling electronics from Barstow to Phoenix, running Interstate 15 through the Mojave Desert. Nothing unusual about the load or the route. I'd made this run hundreds of times over the years. The October air was crisp, temperature dropping into the 60s as midnight approached. My logbook showed I was making good time, ahead of schedule by nearly an hour. Mile 47 is where the Mojave Desert Rest Area sits, a small facility with picnic tables, restrooms, and a couple of vending machines. Most truckers skip it because there's no diesel, but I sometimes stop there to stretch my legs and check my load straps. The desert sky is beautiful from that spot. Stars scattered like broken glass across black velvet. I was about 10 miles out when the CB crackled to life. Breaker 19. This is Desert Eagle eastbound on I-15. The voice was familiar, though I couldn't place it. Got a bear in the bushes at mile marker 52, running radar. Better back it down, good buddy. I glanced at my speedometer, 74, in a 70 zone. Not enough to worry about, but I eased off the throttle anyway. Truckers look out for each other on the road. Always have. Thanks for the heads up, Desert Eagle. I transmitted back. Appreciate the warning. No response. The CB went quiet, except for the soft hiss of static. 5 minutes later, I passed mile marker 52. No patrol car, no speed trap, just empty desert and the steady drone of my engine. Maybe the cop had moved on, or maybe Desert Eagle had been mistaken about the location. It happens. But something about that voice nagged at me. The timbre of it, the inflection on certain words. I'd been driving long enough to recognize voices on the radio. Most of the regular drivers have distinctive ways of speaking. This one felt like an echo of something I'd heard before. 20 minutes later, as I approached the rest area, the CB crackled again. Breaker 19. This is Desert Eagle. The same voice, but now there was an urgency to it that made my skin crawl. Marcus, you need to listen to me. Do not stop at mile 47. Keep driving. Trust me on this one, good buddy. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The voice had used my name. And now that I heard it again, clearer this time, I recognized something that made my blood turn to ice water. It was my voice. My exact voice. Speaking to me through the CB radio. I grabbed the microphone with a shaking hand. Desert Eagle? What's your 20? How do you know my name? Static. Then faintly, as if coming from very far away. Mile 47, Marcus. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. The transmission cut off, leaving only the soft hiss of empty airwaves. I stared at the radio, my heart hammering against my ribs. 32 years on the road, and I'd never experienced anything like this. CB radios can do strange things, sometimes skip signals off the atmosphere, pick up transmissions from hundreds of miles away. But this was different. This was impossible. The rest area appeared in my headlights, a small island of fluorescent light in an ocean of darkness. I'd planned to stop, take a 15-minute break, check my load. Now every instinct screamed at me to keep driving. But curiosity is a powerful thing. And fear can make you do stupid things just to prove you're not afraid. I pulled into the rest area. The place was empty, except for one other truck, a blue Freightliner with Texas plates parked at the far end. The driver was nowhere to be seen, probably sleeping in the sleeper berth. I parked near the restrooms, set my air brakes, and killed the engine. The silence was profound. No traffic on the interstate, no wind through the desert scrub, just the tick of cooling metal and my own breathing. I climbed down from the cab, planning to walk to the restrooms and back. As my boots hit the asphalt, the CB radio crackled to life inside the truck. Marcus, my own voice, speaking my name with desperate urgency. Get back in the truck. Get back in the truck now. I spun around, staring up at the cab. The radio was definitely my voice, but I was standing outside the truck. I looked around, the rest area still empty, except for the sleeping Freightliner. Marcus, please. You have maybe 30 seconds. The voice was pleading now, filled with a terror that made my spine crawl. I grabbed the door handle and pulled myself back into the cab. Who is this? I demanded into the microphone. How are you doing this? I'm you, the voice replied immediately. I'm you from 10 minutes in the future. And if you don't listen to me right now, you're going to disappear, just like all the others. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's impossible. Look in your rearview mirror. I adjusted the mirror, angling it toward the rest area behind me. At first I saw nothing unusual, just empty picnic tables and the glow of security lights. Then movement caught my eye. A figure was walking across the rest area, moving with purpose toward my truck. As it passed under a light, I saw it clearly. It was me. Another Marcus Chen, wearing the same clothes, walking the same way, but his face was wrong. His eyes were black holes, and his mouth moved constantly as if he were speaking, though no sound reached me through the truck windows. Do you see him? My voice asked through the radio. That's impossible, I whispered, unable to look away from the mirror. Start your engine. Now. The other Marcus was getting closer. As he walked, more figures began emerging from the shadows around the rest area. Other truckers, I realized. Men and women in work clothes and baseball caps, all walking with the same purposeful stride, all with the same wrong, empty faces. My hands shook as I turned the key. The engine roared to life, and I slammed the transmission into drive. The one in front, my voice warned through the CB. That's you from last time. The time you didn't listen. In the mirror, I watched the other Marcus break into a run as my truck began to move. Behind him, the crowd of shadow truckers followed, their mouths moving silently, their black eyes reflecting the truck's taillights. I floored the accelerator, tires squealing as I pulled out of the rest area and back onto the interstate. In the mirrors, I could see them standing at the edge of the asphalt, watching my truck disappear into the darkness. 5 miles down the road, the CB crackled one last time. You made it, my voice said. And now it sounded tired, relieved. This time, you made it. What happens now? I asked the radio. Now you drive. And in 10 minutes, when you see another truck pulling into that rest area, you try to warn the driver, just like I warned you. The transmission cut off, leaving only static. I never stopped at mile 47 again. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving that stretch of I-15, I scan the CB frequencies and listen for other drivers approaching the rest area. When I hear them, I try to warn them. Most don't listen. Most think it's just another trucker playing games on the radio. But sometimes, just sometimes, I hear my own voice echoing back through the static, warning me about dangers that haven't happened yet. And I know that somewhere out there, in a timeline I barely escaped, another Marcus Chen is still walking across that rest area, his mouth moving silently, his eyes like empty wells, waiting for the next truck to stop. The desert remembers everything, and some warnings are worth repeating forever. I still check my door locks 3 times before I sleep, even though I know it won't matter. My name is Diana Rodriguez, and I've been driving 18-wheelers for 15 years. Started when my daughter was 3, and I needed work that paid enough to support us both. The road became my office, my sanctuary, my second home. I know every truck stop between Sacramento and San Diego, every way station that runs fair scales, every patch of highway where the cell towers go dark and you're truly alone with your thoughts. I drive a 2019 Kenworth T880, midnight blue with silver trim. She's got 460,000 miles on her. But the engine runs smooth, and the sleeper berth is comfortable enough for the 10-hour breaks required by federal regulations. Most nights, I park at truck stops, well-lit places with security cameras and other drivers nearby. Safety in numbers, especially for a woman traveling alone. The Kern County Truck Plaza on Highway 99 has always been one of my regular stops. Clean restrooms, decent food, and fuel prices that don't gouge you just for driving a big rig. The lot holds maybe 60 trucks, with spaces arranged in neat rows under sodium lights that turn everything the color of old amber. I'd stopped there dozens of times over the years, always felt safe. The night of November 3rd, 2023, I pulled in around 11 p.m. after a long haul from Portland. I was carrying frozen foods for a grocery chain, running on schedule but tired from fighting crosswinds through the Central Valley. My logbook showed I had 8 hours left on my 14-hour duty period, but I needed sleep more than miles. I parked in row 3, space 27, same spot I always chose, when it was available far enough from the building to avoid noise, close enough to the restrooms for convenience. The lot was about half full, mostly other long-haul drivers settling in for their mandatory rest periods. After completing my post-trip inspection and updating my electronic logs, I climbed into the sleeper berth around midnight. The space is small but efficient: a bed, storage compartments, and a small television I never use. I prefer the quiet. The desert air was cool, temperature dropping into the 50s, perfect for sleeping with the windows cracked open. I remember lying down, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin, listening to the distant hum of idling engines and the occasional hiss of air brakes. The last thing I recall was checking my phone 12:43 a.m. and setting it on the shelf beside my head. Then, nothing. A void where 8 hours should have been. I woke up in my truck, but something was wrong immediately. The light was different, too bright, too harsh, and the sounds were wrong too. Instead of diesel engines and air compressors, I heard highway noise, the steady whoosh of fast-moving traffic. I sat up, disoriented, and looked out the sleeper window. I wasn't at the truck stop anymore. My rig was parked on the shoulder of a desert highway I didn't recognize. Miles of scrubland stretched in every direction, broken only by the occasional Joshua tree reaching twisted arms toward a cloudless sky. The sun was already high, casting sharp shadows that indicated it was well past sunrise. My phone showed 8:27 a.m. I'd lost nearly 8 hours. Panic hit me like a physical blow. I scrambled into the driver's seat, checking my surroundings frantically. The highway was busy with morning traffic, but I didn't recognize any landmarks. My GPS unit showed I was on Interstate 5, about 30 miles north of Los Angeles, nearly 200 miles from where I'd gone to sleep. My electronic logbook showed I'd been driving. According to the computer, I'd left the Kern County Truck Plaza at 3:07 a.m. and driven south for over 4 hours. But I had no memory of any of it. No memory of starting the engine, checking mirrors, merging onto the highway, navigating through Bakersfield and down the Grapevine. I called the truck stop immediately, hands shaking as I dialed. "Kern County Truck Plaza," a woman answered. "This is Diana Rodriguez," I said. "I was parked there last night. Space 27. I need to know, did anyone see me leave?" "Hold on, honey." I heard papers rustling, computer keys clicking. "Yeah, I've got your departure logged at 3:07 a.m. Is everything okay? Did anyone actually see me leave? Like, visually confirm?" A pause. "Well, security cameras would have recorded it." "Is there a problem?" "I need to see that footage," I said. Can you ask your manager to save it? Something's wrong here. I drove back to Bakersfield that afternoon, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I sleepwalked? Was I having some kind of breakdown? 15 years on the road without a single accident or violation, and now this. The truck stop manager, a heavy-set man named Carl Brennan, met me in his office behind the fuel desk. He was in his 60s, been managing truck stops for 30 years, seen everything the road could throw at people. You look spooked, he said, gesturing for me to sit. What's this about? I explained what had happened, waking up 200 miles away with no memory of driving there. Carl listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned. Let's look at the footage, he said, turning to a bank of monitors showing feeds from dozens of security cameras. He pulled up the recording from the previous night, fast-forwarding to around 3 a.m. The timestamp in the corner showed 3:04 when my truck's running lights came on. Then, at 3:06, the driver's door opened. What I saw on that grainy black and white footage made my blood freeze. A figure climbed down from the cab, my figure, wearing my clothes, moving with my mannerisms. But even through the poor image quality, I could see something was fundamentally wrong. The person walked with mechanical precision, arms at their sides, head held perfectly straight, and their eyes were closed. Jesus, Carl muttered. That's sleepwalking, all right. Never seen it that pronounced. But keep watching, I whispered. The figure, me, but not me, walked around the truck, performing what looked like a pre-trip inspection with closed eyes, checking tires, lights, connections, all while appearing to be asleep. Then the figure climbed back into the cab. At 3:07, the truck started moving. This is impossible, Carl said. Nobody drives asleep. The truck would have crashed in the first mile, but the security cameras from the exit ramp showed my rig leaving the lot smoothly, signaling properly, merging into traffic with the precision of an experienced driver. There's more, Carl said quietly. He switched to another camera view, this one covering the back lot where the figure had walked before getting in the truck. You might want to prepare yourself. The timestamp showed 2:58 a.m. My figure appeared at the edge of the frame, walking between parked trucks with that same mechanical gait, eyes closed. But as I watched, other figures began appearing in the shadows. Other drivers, men and women in work clothes, all walking with the same precise movements, all with their eyes closed. They moved between the trucks like sleepwalkers in formation, and as my figure passed each one, they fell into step behind me. How many? I asked. Carl counted silently. Looks like 7 or 8, all following you toward your truck. The procession moved with eerie coordination, the other sleepwalking drivers accompanying me to my rig before dispersing back into the shadows between the trucks. At 3:06, when I performed the inspection, several of them stood nearby, motionless, like they were witnessing something important. I called some of the other drivers this morning, Carl said. Asked if anyone had strange dreams last night. 3 of them remembered dreams about walking in the desert, following someone toward a distant light. I stared at the frozen image on the screen myself, eyes closed, hand on my truck's door handle, surrounded by sleeping strangers who'd somehow been drawn into whatever was happening to me. There's something else, Carl said. He pulled up another camera angle. This is from 4 a.m., about an hour after you left. The footage showed several drivers standing beside their trucks, awake now, looking confused and disoriented. One man was checking his clothes as if he'd just discovered he was dressed. A woman was examining her boots, which were covered in dust and sand despite the paved lot. They don't remember any of it, Carl said. But look at their feet. Every person in the frame had desert sand caked on their shoes. I never found out what happened during those missing hours. The State Patrol confirmed that traffic cameras caught my truck traveling south on multiple highways, always maintaining proper speed and lane position. But the driver was never clearly visible through the windshield. I've changed my route since then. Avoid that truck stop. Sleep only in places with full lighting and heavy traffic. But sometimes, when I'm drifting off in my sleeper berth, I feel something tugging at my consciousness, a pull toward movement, toward walking, toward leading others into the dark. I still check my door locks 3 times before I sleep, and in the morning, I always check the soles of my boots for sand. Sometimes I still reach for the radio when I hear her voice calling my number, even though I know she's been dead for 3 years. My name is Robert Thompson. Everyone calls me Big Bob, and I've been an owner-operator for 23 years. Started driving company trucks right out of high school. Saved every penny until I could buy my own rig, a 2015 Peterbilt 389 that I've kept in showroom condition. She's got over 700,000 miles on her now, but the chrome still gleams and the engine still purrs like she's fresh off the assembly line. I run mostly between the Mountain West and Pacific Northwest, hauling everything from lumber to electronics. It's honest work that pays the bills and keeps me moving, which is how I like it. After 2 failed marriages and a mortgage I couldn't afford, the road became my home. The truck is my office, my bedroom, my sanctuary. Echo Valley Travel Center on Interstate 80 in Wyoming has been one of my regular stops for over a decade. It sits in a valley between rolling hills covered in sagebrush and short grass, about 40 miles east of Laramie. Not the biggest truck stop, maybe 30 fuel islands and parking for 100 rigs, but it's always been well managed, with fair fuel prices and decent food. The kind of place where drivers know they'll be treated right. I was there on the night of September 14th, 2023, taking my 10-hour break after a long haul from Seattle. I'd parked in my usual spot near the back of the lot, away from the noise of idling engines and slamming doors. The Wyoming night was crisp, temperature dropping into the 40s, with stars scattered across a sky so clear it looked like black glass. Around 11 p.m., I was settling into my sleeper berth when my Qualcomm dispatch unit chimed with an incoming message. The screen showed it was from Echo Valley Dispatch, which was unusual. Truck stops don't normally send loads directly to drivers. Unit 7492, this is dispatch. Need immediate pickup at Whitewater Junction, milepost 117, Highway 34. Time-sensitive freight. Respond immediately. I frowned at the screen. Unit 7492 was my truck number, but I'd never registered it with Echo Valley's dispatch system. And Highway 34 didn't run through this area. I knew every major route through Wyoming like the back of my hand. I typed back, "This is Big Bob, Unit 7492. No Highway 34 in this area. Please verify location." The response came back immediately. Confirmed. Whitewater Junction, milepost 117. Critical delivery. Lives depend on it. Please respond, Big Bob. Something about the phrasing bothered me. Truck dispatchers don't usually mention lives depending on deliveries, and they definitely don't use personal names in official communications. I decided to walk into the truck stop and ask about it directly. The night clerk, a young woman named Ashley, looked confused when I showed her the messages. "We don't have a dispatch service," she said. "Never have. This has to be coming from somewhere else." I showed her my Qualcomm unit. It's showing Echo Valley as the source. She called her manager, an older man named Pete Kowalski, who'd been running the place for 15 years. Pete looked at the messages and shook his head. "That's impossible," he said. "We've never had dispatch capabilities here, and there's no Whitewater Junction anywhere in Wyoming." Back in my truck, the Qualcomm chimed again. This time, the message was more urgent. "Unit 7492, where are you? Whitewater Junction pickup critical. Other drivers already en route. Don't leave them stranded." "Other drivers?" I typed back. "What other drivers? Need more information." Billy Hartson, Unit 3218. Sarah Kim, Unit 8845. Tommy Martinez, Unit 5591. All responding to Whitewater Junction. "You're the closest unit, Big Bob. They're counting on you." The names meant nothing to me, but something about the desperation in the messages was getting under my skin. I fired up my GPS and tried searching for Whitewater Junction. Nothing. I tried different variations: Whitewater, Whitewater Creek, Whitewater Road. Still nothing. The messages kept coming, increasingly frantic. Big Bob, respond immediately. Situation deteriorating. Unit 7492. Drivers trapped at Whitewater Junction. Bob, please. They don't have much time. That last message made my blood run cold. It wasn't formatted like the others, no unit numbers, no official language, just a personal plea. I walked back into the truck stop and found Pete still in his office. I need to ask you something, I said. Has anyone ever died here? In a fire? Maybe? Pete's face went pale. Why would you ask that? These messages, something about them feels wrong. Pete was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Linda Walsh. She was our night dispatcher for 12 years. There was a fire in 2020, started in the restaurant kitchen, spread to the office area before the fire department could get here. Linda was trying to coordinate evacuations over the radio when the roof came down. What was she saying? On the radio? She was directing drivers away from the building, trying to get them to safety. She kept calling out truck numbers, telling people where to go. Even after the smoke got bad, even after everyone else had evacuated, she stayed at her post. The last thing the fire department heard was her calling for backup units to respond to some location they couldn't identify. My hands were shaking. Whitewater Junction? Pete nodded slowly. That's what they said in the report. She kept repeating that location, saying drivers were in trouble there. But it doesn't exist, Bob. Never has. I returned to my truck, and the Qualcomm was flashing with new messages. Bob, I can see the smoke from here. Get to Whitewater Junction now. The fire is spreading. Billy's truck won't start. Sarah's trapped in her cab. Door won't open. Bob, please, I can't reach them from here. The timestamp on the messages showed they were being sent in real time, but the content made no sense. I was parked in a well-lit truck stop, with no sign of fire anywhere. Then I heard it faint static from my CB radio, even though it was turned off. I reached over and turned up the volume. A woman's voice came through the speaker, distorted by interference but clearly audible. This is Echo Valley Dispatch to all units in the area. We have drivers trapped at Whitewater Junction. Fire department is en route, but we need immediate assistance. I grabbed the microphone. Echo Valley Dispatch. This is Big Bob. What's your location? Bob. The relief in her voice was palpable. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you. The fire started about 20 minutes ago. Billy Hartson is unconscious in his cab, Unit 3218. Sarah Kim's door is jammed, Unit 8845. Tommy Martinez is helping evacuate other drivers, but his truck won't start. Ma'am, where is Whitewater Junction? I can't find it on any map. Static filled the channel for several seconds. When her voice returned, it was fainter, as if coming from very far away. Bob, you have to understand. Whitewater Junction isn't a place you drive to. It's where we end up when we can't find our way out. I've been trying to guide drivers away from here for 3 years, but the fire never stopped spreading. I looked out my windshield at the peaceful truck stop, then back at the CB radio. Linda? Is this Linda Walsh? The roof is coming down, Bob. I can see the beams starting to buckle, but I can't leave my post. There are still drivers out there who need help. The transmission cut off, leaving only static. I sat in my truck until dawn, waiting for more messages, more calls. They never came. When I asked Pete about the CB transmissions, he said the radio tower had been destroyed in the fire and never rebuilt. I still drive through Echo Valley sometimes, but I always keep my Qualcomm and CB radio turned off when I'm there. Because sometimes, late at night, when the Wyoming wind picks up, I can hear Linda's voice calling out truck numbers, directing drivers to safety from a dispatch center that burned down 3 years ago. And sometimes, when I'm feeling particularly tired or lost, I wonder if maybe Whitewater Junction is real. After all, a place where dispatchers who die at their posts keep working forever, trying to guide the rest of us home. I can still see those lights when I close my eyes, pulsing beneath water that hasn't existed for 20 years. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've been driving commercial trucks for 8 months. It's not the career I planned. I had a degree in marketing and a good job at an advertising firm in Reno. But the company folded during the recession, and I needed work that paid enough to cover my student loans. The trucking school in Carson City promised steady employment and decent money, and they weren't wrong. What they didn't mention was how the isolation gets to you, especially on the long hauls through Nevada's empty highways. I drive a 2022 Freightliner Cascadia Company truck with over 200,000 miles already on the odometer. She's not fancy, but she's reliable. And the sleeper berth is comfortable enough for the 10-hour breaks mandated by federal regulations. Most nights I try to stop at major truck stops, Flying J, Pilot, Love's places with good lighting and security cameras. But sometimes the timing doesn't work out, and you end up at smaller rest areas where the only company is the desert wind and distant coyotes. Deadwater Lake Rest Stop on Highway 50 is one of those places. It sits beside what used to be a lake, back when the area had more rainfall and different water management. Now it's just a depression in the earth, maybe 50 acres of cracked mud and scattered rocks, surrounded by low hills covered in sagebrush. The rest stop itself is basic picnic tables, restrooms, and a few parking spaces for trucks. No fuel, no food, no amenities beyond the bare minimum. I'd stopped there twice before without incident, just quick breaks to check my load and stretch my legs. But the night of December 8th, 2023, I was running behind schedule on a delivery to Salt Lake City and needed to take my full 10-hour rest period. I pulled in around 9 p.m., the only truck in the lot. The December air was bitter cold, temperature already dropping below freezing. I completed my post-trip inspection quickly and climbed into the sleeper berth, planning to get some sleep and be back on the road by 7 a.m. The silence was profound. No traffic on Highway 50 at that hour. No wind. Just the tick of cooling metal and my own breathing. Around 11:30, I was still awake, reading on my tablet, when I noticed a faint glow outside the sleeper window. At first, I thought it was another truck pulling in. But when I looked out, the parking area was still empty. The light was coming from the dried lake bed. It was subtle at first, just a pale blue radiance beneath the cracked mud surface, like moonlight reflecting off water that wasn't there. I watched for several minutes, thinking it might be some kind of geological phenomenon, maybe minerals in the soil, reacting to temperature changes. But the light began to move, shifting and pulsing in patterns that seemed almost organic. I climbed into the driver's seat for a better view. Through the windshield, I could see the entire lake bed. And the lights were everywhere now, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, glowing like bioluminescent organisms in deep water. They pulsed in waves, creating patterns that rippled across the dried surface from one end to the other. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. I grabbed my phone and tried to record the phenomenon, but the camera only showed darkness. The lights were invisible to the lens, visible only to my naked eyes. I checked my dash cam, a forward-facing unit that records continuously, but its display showed only the empty lake bed in infrared, no trace of the luminescence I was seeing. Over the next hour, the lights grew brighter and more active. They began forming geometric patterns, spirals, concentric circles, lines that intersected and divided. It looked like some kind of communication system, or perhaps a form of underwater life continuing its ancient routines in a lake that no longer existed. Around midnight, I heard tapping on my passenger side window. I turned and saw a figure standing beside my truck, a woman in her 40s wearing a truck stop uniform, the kind worn by fuel desk clerks and restaurant workers. Her face was pale, and her eyes reflected the interior lights of my cab strangely, like they were filled with water. "You can see them too, can't you?" she asked, her voice muffled by the glass but clearly audible. I rolled down the window a crack. "See what?" "The lights. In the water." "There is no water," I said. "That's a dried lake bed." She smiled, and when she did, I could see that her teeth were stained with silt. "There's always water, honey. Some of us just forgot how to breathe it." Before I could respond, she walked away toward the lake bed. I watched her cross the cracked mud surface, moving with purpose toward the brightest concentration of lights. As she walked, the luminescence seemed to respond to her presence, growing more intense beneath her feet. She reached the center of the lake bed and simply kept walking. I expected to see her climb out the other side, but instead she seemed to sink into the solid ground as if it were liquid. In moments, she was gone, and the lights began to fade. By 12:30 a.m., the lake bed was dark again. I convinced myself I'd been dreaming, hallucinating from exhaustion and isolation. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and tried to get some sleep. I woke up at 8:15, over an hour late, with no memory of my alarm going off. Worse, I was sitting in the driver's seat, fully dressed, with my seatbelt fastened and the engine running. My last clear memory was lying down in the sleeper berth. That's when I noticed the mud on my boots. Thick, gray mud that smelled like deep water and decomposing plants. The same mud I'd seen in the dried lake bed. I checked my clothes and found more mud on my jeans and jacket, along with something that looked like algae. Panic set in. I grabbed my phone and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm at the Deadwater Lake rest stop on Highway 50. Something's wrong with me. I think I've been sleepwalking or something worse. The dispatcher took my information and sent a Nevada Highway Patrol officer. Trooper Janet Holbrook arrived within 30 minutes. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "You said something was wrong?" she asked. I explained about the lights, the missing time, the mud on my clothes. Trooper Holbrook listened without interrupting, then asked to check my dashcam footage. The camera had recorded everything. At exactly 12:47 a.m., it showed me opening the driver's door and climbing down from the cab. But what I saw on that small screen made my blood freeze. The Sarah Mitchell on the recording moved with the same mechanical precision I'd seen in the strange woman. She walked across the empty parking area and onto the lake bed, moving in a straight line toward its center. But unlike the woman in the uniform, this Sarah didn't sink into the ground. Instead, she stood motionless in the middle of the dried lake for over 6 hours. "Jesus," Trooper Holbrook muttered. "You were out there until almost 7 a.m. On the recording, I could see myself standing perfectly still, arms at my sides, face turned toward the sky. Occasionally, my head would turn slightly, as if I were listening to something, but otherwise I remained motionless. At 6:53 a.m., the recorded Sarah suddenly turned and walked back to the truck, climbing into the driver's seat and starting the engine. The timestamp showed I'd been sitting there, apparently unconscious for over an hour before waking up. "I need you to come with me to the hospital," Trooper Holbrook said, "for observation." At Carson Tahoe Medical Center, Dr. Elizabeth Reeves examined me thoroughly. Blood work, neurological tests, psychiatric evaluation, everything came back normal, except for one impossible detail. "Your body temperature was 87 degrees when you arrived." Dr. Reeves said, "That's severe hypothermia. You should have been unconscious or dead, but your vital signs are normal now, and you show no signs of cold exposure." The nurse, a young man named Kevin Patel, was more direct. "I checked your pulse 3 times when you first got here," he said quietly. "For the first hour, you didn't have one. You were sitting up, talking, completely responsive, but your heart wasn't beating." I was released that afternoon with instructions to follow up with my regular physician and a psychiatrist, but I never made those appointments. Instead, I quit trucking and moved back to Reno, taking a job at a call center that keeps me indoors and away from empty highways. Sometimes, though, usually around midnight, I can feel the pull of those lights. They're still down there beneath the dry lake, pulsing in patterns that speak a language I almost understand. And on the coldest nights, when the desert wind rattles my windows, I can taste silt and algae in my mouth, as if I'm still breathing water that doesn't exist. The last entry in my logbook was written in handwriting I don't recognize, documenting a trip I never took to a place that doesn't exist. My name is James Patterson, and I've been driving trucks for 31 years. Started when I was 25, right after my second daughter was born, and I needed better money than the factory job could provide. It's been a good living, steady work, decent pay, and enough time at home to watch my girls grow up. Now they're both in college, and my wife Helen and I are looking forward to my retirement in a few years. I drive a 2019 Kenworth W900, deep blue with gold trim. She's got over 500,000 miles on her, but I've maintained her religiously, every oil change on schedule, every inspection thorough. The cab is my mobile office, equipped with everything I need for long hauls: GPS, CB radio, satellite radio, and a small refrigerator that keeps my sandwiches cold. After 3 decades on the road, I know my equipment and I know my routes. The White Mountain Pass rest area on Interstate 25 in New Mexico sits at 7,200 feet elevation, surrounded by pine trees and granite outcroppings. It's a small facility, maybe 6 parking spaces for trucks, restrooms, and a few picnic tables. Most drivers skip it because there's no fuel or food, but I've always liked the quiet and the clean mountain air. It's a good place to take your mandatory 10-hour break away from the noise and diesel fumes of bigger truck stops. I pulled in there on the evening of January 22nd, 2024, hauling machinery parts from Albuquerque to Denver. The January air was crisp and thin, temperature dropping into the 20s as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Snow dusted the pine boughs and crunched under my boots as I walked around my rig, checking straps and lights. I was the only truck in the lot, which wasn't unusual for a weeknight in winter. The silence was profound, just the tick of cooling metal and the distant whisper of wind through the trees. I climbed into my sleeper berth around 8 p.m., planning to rest until 6 a.m. and be back on the road early. Around 10:30, I was lying in my bunk reading when I noticed something in my passenger side mirror. The mirror is positioned so I can see behind and beside my trailer while lying down, a safety feature that lets me monitor my surroundings during rest periods. A figure was standing in the snow about 100 feet behind my truck. At first, I thought it was another driver, maybe someone who'd pulled in quietly while I was reading. But as I watched, the figure remained perfectly motionless. It was wearing a high-visibility safety vest, the kind worn by construction workers and emergency responders, and appeared to be facing my truck. I climbed into the driver's seat for a better look. Through the main mirrors, I could see the figure more clearly. Average height, indeterminate gender, standing with arms at their sides in the exact center of the rest area. The safety vest was bright yellow-green, clearly visible in the light from the parking area's single lamppost. I flashed my headlights twice, the universal trucker signal for "I see you." The figure didn't respond, didn't wave, didn't move, didn't acknowledge the lights in any way. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab, planning to walk over and check on whoever it was. Maybe they needed help, or were having truck problems I couldn't see from my position. But as soon as my boots hit the asphalt, the figure was gone. I swept the area with my flashlight beam, checking behind every tree and rock outcropping large enough to hide a person. Nothing. The snow showed no footprints except my own, and the nearest tree line was at least 50 yards away, too far for someone to have reached in the few seconds it took me to climb down. Back in my truck, I checked all my mirrors again. Empty parking lot, undisturbed snow, no sign anyone had ever been there. I convinced myself I'd been seeing things, maybe shadows cast by pine boughs, moving in the wind, or reflection from my own interior lights playing tricks on the mirror surfaces. I went back to my bunk and tried to read, but I found myself checking the mirrors every few minutes. At 11:45, the figure was back, same position, same bright vest, same perfect stillness. This time I watched for over an hour, noting every detail I could discern. The figure never moved, never shifted position, never showed any sign of being affected by the cold mountain air. It simply stood there, facing my truck, as motionless as a mannequin. At 1 a.m., I tried an experiment. I turned on my truck's work lights, powerful LED floods mounted on the cab that illuminate the entire area around my rig. In the harsh white light, I could see every detail of the rest area clearly. The figure was gone again. I turned off the work lights, and within seconds, it reappeared in the mirrors. This went on for the next 4 hours. Every time I used any external lights, the figure vanished. Every time I relied only on the ambient lighting from the lamppost, it returned to the exact same position. I took photos with my phone, but they showed only empty asphalt and snow. Around 5 a.m., exhausted and unnerved, I decided to leave early. I completed my pre-trip inspection by flashlight, noting that my electronic logbook showed I'd taken a full 10-hour break, even though I'd been awake most of the night. As I prepared to start the engine, I checked my mirrors one last time. The figure was there, but now it was closer, maybe 50 feet behind my trailer instead of 100. I started the engine and put the truck in gear. In the mirrors, I watched the figure begin to walk toward my truck, matching my speed as I pulled out of the rest area. As I accelerated onto the interstate, the figure broke into a run, its bright vest visible in my mirrors. Until I crested the first hill, I drove straight to Denver, delivered my load, and tried to put the experience behind me. But when I stopped for fuel in Colorado Springs, I checked my electronic logbook and found something that made my hands shake. The device showed I'd made additional stops during the night locations I'd never heard of, with names like Whispering Valley Junction and Shadowbrook Depot. According to the electronic record, I'd left White Mountain Pass at 2:17 a.m., made pickups at these phantom locations, and returned by 4:30 a.m. But more disturbing were the handwritten entries in my paper logbook. Federal regulations require drivers to maintain both electronic and written records, and someone had filled in the missing hours with detailed notes about cargo pickups, mileage, and fuel consumption. The handwriting was neat, precise, and completely unfamiliar. The entries described hauling special materials to designated facilities along routes that don't exist on any map. The final entry, written in the same careful script, simply said, "Assignment complete. Driver unaware. Recommend continued monitoring." I reported the incident to my dispatcher and the Department of Transportation. DOT investigators examined my truck's GPS data and found gaps in the electronic record that corresponded exactly to the phantom trips in my logbook. The truck's engine computer showed I'd driven nearly 200 additional miles during my supposed rest period, but I had no memory of any of it. The strangest part was what they found in my cargo area. Despite having delivered my load completely and on schedule, there were traces of materials that weren't on my original manifest: metallic dust, organic compounds, and substances the lab couldn't identify. I don't drive the White Mountain Pass route anymore. I take longer routes, pay more for fuel, and spend extra hours on the road just to avoid that rest area. But sometimes, when I'm checking my mirrors during routine stops, I catch glimpses of that bright yellow-green vest in my peripheral vision. And sometimes, when I review my logbooks at the end of each week, I find entries in that same careful handwriting, documenting trips I never took, to places I've never been, carrying cargo I never loaded for customers that don't exist. I still hear their voices calling for help on Channel 19, even though I know they've been dead for years. My name is Antonio Vasquez, and I've been driving trucks for 18 years. Started as a company driver hauling produce out of Salinas. Worked my way up to team operations running coast to coast with my driving partner Miguel Santos. We've been teaming for 7 years now, splitting the driving duties so we can keep the truck moving 24 hours a day. It's good money, steady work, and Miguel's become like a brother to me over all those miles. We drive a 2021 Freightliner Cascadia, white with blue trim, equipped with a double sleeper berth that gives us each our own space during rest periods. The truck has over 400,000 miles on her, but we maintain her like she's brand new. Our CB radio is a Cobra 29 with a high-gain antenna, essential equipment for team drivers who need to coordinate with each other and stay aware of road conditions ahead. The Coyote Canyon Way Station on Highway 395 sits in one of the most isolated stretches of eastern California. It's a mandatory stop for all commercial vehicles, but it's only staffed during business hours. At night, it's just an empty concrete platform, surrounded by desert scrub and the dark mouth of Coyote Canyon. The canyon walls rise maybe 200 feet on either side, creating an echo chamber that amplifies every sound. Miguel and I had been through that way station dozens of times over the years, usually during daylight hours when the inspectors were working. But the night of March 15th, 2024, we hit it around 2 a.m., while Miguel was sleeping in the bunk, and I was driving our load of electronics from Los Angeles to Denver. The scales were closed, but I pulled onto the platform anyway to check our weight and take a quick break. Federal regulations allow drivers to stop at way stations for safety checks, even when they're unstaffed. I set the air brakes and left the engine idling, planning to grab a cup of coffee and stretch my legs for 15 minutes. That's when I heard the first call. Breaker 19. This is westbound Willie at the Coyote Canyon scales. I've got a problem here and could use some assistance. I grabbed the microphone immediately. Team drivers, look out for each other. On the road, it's an unwritten rule that goes back decades. Westbound Willie, this is Desert Eagle at your 20. What kind of assistance do you need? Static filled the channel for several seconds. Then, Desert Eagle, thank God. My trailer's got a busted airline and I can't get my brakes to release. Been stuck here for over an hour. I looked around the way station. My truck was the only vehicle on the platform. No other trucks, no cars. Nothing but empty concrete and desert darkness. Willie, I don't see your rig. What's your exact location? I'm about 100 yards down into the canyon, pulled off on the old maintenance road. Can you see my marker lights from up there? I climbed down from the cab and walked to the edge of the platform. Coyote Canyon dropped away into blackness, the bottom lost in shadows. I couldn't see any lights, any vehicles, any sign of another truck. Negative on the marker lights, Willie. You sure you're at Coyote Canyon? Been driving this route for 23 years, Desert Eagle. I know where I am. Look, I've got a flashlight. I'm going to flash it 3 times. I stared into the canyon and saw 3 distinct flashes of light, deep in the shadows, maybe halfway down the canyon wall. Someone was definitely down there. I see your light, Willie. Hold tight, I'm coming down. I grabbed my own flashlight and emergency kit from the truck, leaving Miguel sleeping in the bunk. The maintenance road Willie had mentioned wasn't visible from the way station, but I found a narrow dirt path that switchbacked down the canyon wall. The descent was treacherous in the dark, loose rocks and steep grades that could send you tumbling if you weren't careful. Halfway down, I called out, "Willie, where are you?" "Over here, by the big boulder." "Follow my voice." I followed the sound deeper into the canyon, my flashlight beam dancing across rock walls and scattered debris. The air was still and cold, carrying strange echoes that seemed to come from all directions. "Willie, keep talking so I can find you." "I'm here, Desert Eagle, right here by my truck." But when I reached the location where the voice seemed strongest, there was nothing. No truck, no driver, no maintenance road. Just canyon floor, covered in sand and small rocks. undisturbed by tire tracks or footprints. Willie, where are you? I'm at your 20, but I don't see anything. Silence on the radio. Complete silence. I spent another 20 minutes searching the canyon floor, calling Willie's name and trying to raise him on the CB. Nothing. When I finally climbed back up to the way station, Miguel was awake and worried. Where have you been, Hermano? You left the truck running and disappeared. I explained about the radio call and my search of the canyon. Miguel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned. Antonio, nobody called for help on the radio. I was lying in the bunk with the CB on. I would have heard any transmissions. You were sleeping. Maybe you didn't notice. I was awake for the last hour, listening to the chatter on 19. The only voice I heard was yours, talking to yourself. The next day, we delivered our load in Denver, and I tried to put the incident behind me. But 3 weeks later, we were back at Coyote Canyon for another late-night way check, and it happened again. This time, the voice belonged to someone called Roadrunner Rachel. Breaker 19. This is Roadrunner Rachel at Coyote Canyon. I've jackknifed my rig and I'm trapped in the cab. Is anyone out there? Again, I was alone on the way station platform. Again, Miguel insisted he heard no radio transmissions except my own voice responding to silence. But when Rachel flashed her emergency lights, I could see them clearly in the canyon depths. This time I made it all the way to the canyon floor before losing the signal. And this time, when I returned to the truck, Miguel was recording everything with his phone. Listen to this, he said, playing back the audio. On the recording, I could hear my own voice clearly, asking for locations, offering assistance, coordinating rescue efforts. But the voices I'd been responding to weren't there. Just dead air between my transmissions, like I was having a conversation with ghosts. Miguel insisted we report the incident to our company, and they ordered us to undergo psychological evaluations. The company doctor, Dr. Patricia Morales, listened to our account and reviewed Miguel's recordings. Have either of you researched the history of that way station? She asked. We hadn't. But after the evaluation, Miguel looked it up online. What he found made our experiences even more disturbing. Over the past 15 years, 7 truckers had died in accidents within a 5-mile radius of the Coyote Canyon way station. Mechanical failures, jackknifes, brake problems, all the issues I'd been hearing described on the radio. The most recent was Willie Hendricks, a 23-year veteran driver who'd crashed in the canyon 3 years earlier when his air brakes failed. The victims' names matched the CB handles I'd been hearing: Westbound Willie, Roadrunner Rachel, Desert Storm Danny, Canyon Runner Carl, and others. Dr. Morales referred us to a specialist in auditory hallucinations. But before we could make that appointment, the California Highway Patrol contacted us. They'd been reviewing security footage from the way station cameras Miguel and I didn't even know existed. Officer Sandra Liu showed us the recordings from both nights. The footage clearly showed me climbing down from our truck, walking to the edge of the canyon, and having animated conversations with empty air. On the audio track, my voice was clearly audible, asking questions, offering help, and providing detailed instructions for mechanical repairs. The strangest part, Officer Liu said, is that your advice was technically accurate. You were describing proper procedures for brake repairs, jackknife recovery, and emergency protocols. But you were giving this information to no one. The final recording showed me standing at the bottom of Coyote Canyon, flashlight beam playing across the empty rocks, having what appeared to be a detailed conversation with multiple people. I gestured, nodded, shook hands with invisible partners, and even appeared to help move equipment that wasn't there. How long was I down there? I asked. 47 minutes, the second time. You had detailed conversations with at least 5 different individuals, based on your responses and body language. Miguel and I don't run the 395 route anymore. We changed our routing to avoid Coyote Canyon, even though it adds 2 hours to our Denver runs. But sometimes, when we're stopped at other way stations late at night, I hear familiar voices on Channel 19 Willie, asking about his brakes, Rachel trapped in her jackknifed cab, Danny warning about black ice ahead. And sometimes, despite Miguel's worried protests, I find myself reaching for the microphone to respond. Because that's what truckers do. We help each other, whether we're living or dead, whether the conversation is real or just echoes bouncing off canyon walls in the dark. According to my electronic logbook, I drove through solid rock at 90 miles per hour last Tuesday night, while I was sound asleep in my bunk. My name is Linda Walsh, and trucking is in my blood. My father drove for 38 years before his heart gave out at a truck stop in Oklahoma, and I've been following his roots for 12 years now. Started driving right after high school when the economy was bad and college wasn't an option. Dad taught me everything: how to back a 53-foot trailer into a tight dock, how to read the road conditions ahead, how to manage my hours of service to maximize efficiency and safety. I drive a 2020 Peterbilt 579 Burgundy with chrome accents, the kind of classic rig Dad always admired. She's got 380,000 miles on her, but I maintain her religiously. Every oil change, every inspection, every minor repair gets done right the first time. The electronic logging device is mounted on the dashboard. Federal law requires all commercial drivers to use them now, tracking our driving time, rest periods, and location data to ensure compliance with safety regulations. The Blackwater Travel Plaza on Interstate 40 sits in one of the emptiest stretches of the Texas Panhandle, surrounded by flat grassland that extends to the horizon in every direction. It's a full-service truck stop with fuel, food, showers, and parking for over 100 rigs. I've been stopping there for years, usually on my regular runs between Dallas and Albuquerque. The staff knows me, the fuel prices are fair, and it's positioned perfectly for my mandatory 10-hour breaks. I pulled in there on the night of April 9th, 2024, hauling auto parts from Fort Worth to Phoenix. It had been a long day fighting crosswinds across North Texas, and I was ready for sleep. I parked in Space 47, completed my post-trip inspection, and updated my electronic logs. Everything showed normal: 9 hours and 15 minutes of driving time, well within legal limits, with my mandatory rest period starting at 10:23 p.m. The April night was warm and still, temperature in the 70s with a clear sky full of stars. I climbed into my sleeper berth around 11 p.m., set my alarm for 8 a.m., and fell asleep listening to the distant hum of idling diesel engines and the occasional hiss of air brakes. I slept soundly for what felt like a full night. No dreams I could remember, no disturbances, just the deep rest that comes after a long day on the road. When my alarm went off at 8 a.m., I felt refreshed and ready for the day's drive. That's when I checked my electronic logs and found the first impossibility. According to the device, I had driven for 6 hours and 43 minutes during my rest period. The computer showed me leaving the truck stop at 1:17 a.m., traveling southeast at speeds ranging from 60 to 95 miles per hour, and returning at 7:23 a.m. But I had clear memories of sleeping through the night, and my truck was parked in the exact same space where I'd left it. I assumed it was a malfunction. Electronic logging devices can glitch, especially the older models. I made a note in my paper logbook about the error and prepared to leave. But when I started my pre-trip inspection, I found mud caked in my wheel wells. Thick, black mud that smelled like stagnant water and decomposing plants. The kind of mud you'd find in a swamp or marsh, not the dry grasslands surrounding the truck stop. And there were scratches on my trailer, deep gouges in the aluminum siding that looked like they'd been made by tree branches or rocks. I called my dispatcher to report the electronic log malfunction. Ray Hendricks had been coordinating my loads for 8 years, and he knew my equipment and driving patterns better than anyone. "Linda, your GPS tracking shows the same thing as your e-logs," he said after checking the company's monitoring system. You left Blackwater at 1:17 a.m. and drove a route through East Texas that I've never seen before. Took you through terrain that doesn't have any roads. That's impossible, Ray. I was asleep in my bunk all night. I'm looking at the GPS plot right now. You drove through the Caddo Lake area, then south into the Big Thicket. Some of these coordinates show you traveling through swampland where there aren't any highways. I downloaded the GPS data to my tablet and studied the route. The tracking showed my truck leaving Interstate 40, taking increasingly remote state highways, then following roads that didn't appear on any map. The final hours showed me traveling through areas marked as protected wetlands and national forest, terrain that would be impossible for an 18-wheeler to navigate. But the most disturbing detail was the speed data. According to the GPS, I had maintained highway speeds through these impossible areas, averaging 70 miles per hour through swamps and forests that would have stopped any truck within the first mile. I spent the morning at Blackwater trying to understand what had happened. The truck stop manager, an older woman named Carol Jennings, had been working there for 15 years and knew most of the regular drivers. "You're not the first one to have this problem," she said when I showed her my electronic logs. "Had a driver last month with the same issue logs showing impossible trips while he was parked here sleeping. And there's been others over the years." "What do you mean, others?" Carol's expression grew troubled. "Drivers who said their logs were recording phantom trips. Most of them complained about it once or twice. Then we never saw them again. Figured they just changed routes or found work elsewhere." She pulled out a notebook from behind the counter. "I started keeping track after the third or fourth incident. Here's what I've got." The notebook contained details about dozens of drivers who'd experienced similar electronic log anomalies at Blackwater over the past 10 years. Names, dates, and brief descriptions of impossible routes recorded while the drivers claimed to be sleeping. The most recent entry was dated 3 weeks earlier. "Have any of these drivers come back through?" I asked. "That's the strange part," Carol said. "None of them. Once they start having the phantom trips, they disappear entirely. No more stops here, no more fuel purchases, nothing." I studied the list of names and felt a chill when I recognized several of them. These were experienced drivers, professionals I'd known from CB chatter and truck stop encounters over the years. Not the kind of people who would just vanish from the industry without word. That night, I decided to stay at Blackwater again, this time with my tablet recording continuously and my door locked from the inside. I wanted to catch whatever was causing the electronic log malfunctions. I set up my tablet to record the interior of my cab, positioned it so it would show me sleeping in the bunk. Then I settled in for the night, determined to solve the mystery. I woke up 8 hours later to find my tablet was gone. Not just turned off or moved completely gone. I searched every inch of my cab and found no trace of it. But my electronic logs showed another impossible journey. This one lasting 7 hours and 15 minutes through terrain that would have been impassable for any vehicle. This time, the route took me through the heart of East Texas, following waterways and game trails through areas that hadn't seen roads since the 19th century. The GPS coordinates showed me traveling at impossible speeds, through swamps, over rivers, and through forests too dense for any truck to penetrate. But when I checked my fuel gauge, it showed I'd burned nearly 200 gallons, exactly what you'd expect for a 7-hour journey at highway speeds. I left Blackwater that morning and drove straight to the company headquarters in Dallas. Ray Hendricks met me with a team of technicians who examined every inch of my truck and its electronic systems. "Everything checks out mechanically," the lead tech told me. "But your GPS module has data stored that doesn't match any known roads or highways in Texas. Some of these coordinates are in the middle of lakes and rivers." The company's safety director, a former DOT investigator named Frank Morrison, studied my electronic logs and compared them to the incidents Carol had documented. "I'm seeing a pattern here," he said. "Every one of these phantom routes passes through the same general area, the wetlands between Caddo Lake and the Big Thicket. And they all follow similar patterns, leaving paved roads, traveling impossible terrain, maintaining highway speeds through areas where no vehicle could survive. Frank made some calls to his contacts at the Department of Transportation. What he learned made the mystery even more disturbing. 7 of the drivers on Carroll's list had been reported missing over the past decade. Their trucks had been found abandoned at various locations throughout East Texas, all within 50 miles of the routes shown in their final electronic log entries. The trucks were always discovered in impossible locations, sitting in clearings with no access roads, balanced on riverbeds, positioned in swamplands where they should have sunk immediately. But the drivers were never found. I don't stop at Blackwater anymore. I adjust my routes, plan my fuel stops differently, and accept the inconvenience of longer drives to avoid that stretch of Interstate 40. But sometimes, when I'm reviewing my electronic logs at the end of each week, I find entries that don't belong, phantom miles through impossible terrain, recorded while I was sleeping in truck stops hundreds of miles away. And sometimes, late at night when the CB radio crackles with distant chatter, I hear familiar voices calling for help from coordinates that don't exist on any map, from roads that lead deeper into the dark heart of East Texas, where trucks travel at impossible speeds, through terrain that would destroy them, carrying drivers who will never make it home. I slept for 3 days straight at Stillwater Station, and I remember every mile of the road I drove while unconscious. My name is Derek Hoffman, and I've been hauling freight for 26 years. Started driving when I was 22, fresh out of the Army, with a clean driving record and a strong work ethic. Built up a reputation for reliability over the decades, always on time, never a damaged load, never a safety violation. I own my rig, a 2017 Kenworth T680 with over 600,000 miles on her, and I maintain every bolt and wire myself. The road has been good to me, but it's also been lonely. My wife left after 10 years of marriage, said she couldn't compete with the highway. Can't blame her for that. When you're gone 3 weeks out of every month, relationships become difficult to maintain. Now it's just me and the truck, running loads across the western states, following routes I've memorized over thousands of trips. Stillwater Truck Stop on Highway 287 sits in the heart of Montana ranch country, surrounded by rolling grassland that stretches to the Rocky Mountains on the western horizon. It's a small operation, maybe 20 parking spaces, basic fuel and food services, clean restrooms, the kind of place where drivers stop because it's positioned perfectly for mandatory rest breaks, not because of amenities or convenience. I'd been stopping at Stillwater for over 15 years without incident. The owner, an older man named Eugene Barrett, knew my schedule and always saved space 17 for me when I was running my regular Denver to Billings route. The staff was friendly, the fuel prices fair, and it was quiet enough to get good rest during my 10-hour breaks. The night of May 20th, 2024, I pulled in around 9 p.m. after a long haul from Colorado. I was carrying agricultural equipment, running on schedule, but tired from fighting headwinds across Wyoming. My electronic logs showed I had exactly 10 hours for my mandatory rest period before I could legally resume driving. I parked in my usual spot, completed my post-trip inspection, and climbed into the sleeper berth. The Montana evening was cool and clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. I set my alarm for 7 a.m., planning to grab breakfast and be back on the road by 8. I remember lying down, pulling the thin blanket up to my chest, and feeling that familiar heaviness that comes at the end of a long driving day. The last thing I recall was checking my phone, 9:47 p.m., and listening to the distant lowing of cattle from the surrounding ranches. Then nothing. A void where time should have been. I woke up to someone knocking on my sleeper berth window. Disoriented and groggy, I pulled back the curtain to find Eugene Barrett standing beside my truck. His weathered face creased with concern. "Derek, you okay in there? You've been sleeping for 3 days." 3 days. The words didn't make sense. I checked my phone. 7:23 a.m. May 23rd. 72 hours had passed in what felt like a single night's sleep. That's impossible, I said, climbing down from the cab. I just went to sleep last night. Son, it's been 3 days. I've been checking on you regularly, and you were breathing fine. Just wouldn't wake up no matter how hard I knocked. Was about to call for medical help. I felt fine, rested, alert. Not at all like someone who'd been unconscious for 3 days. But the evidence was undeniable. My electronic logs showed I'd exceeded my hours of service by over 60 hours. My dispatch had been calling frantically. My delivery was now 2 days late. But here's the thing that made no sense. I remembered driving. Not just fragments or dreamlike images, but detailed, complete memories of continuing my route to Billings, delivering my load, picking up a return shipment, and driving back toward Colorado. I could recall specific mile markers, truck stops, conversations with other drivers. The memories were as clear and vivid as any real experience I'd ever had. In my phantom journey, I'd encountered a massive pileup on Interstate 90, just west of Billings. Black ice had caused a chain reaction accident involving 7 vehicles, including 2 semis. In the memory, I'd helped coordinate the emergency response, used my truck to redirect traffic, and provided first aid until paramedics arrived. Eugene helped me contact my dispatcher and my delivery customer, but I couldn't stop thinking about the accident I'd witnessed while unconscious. On impulse, I called the Montana Highway Patrol. Yeah, we had a bad one on I-90 2 nights ago, Trooper Lisa Manning told me. 7-vehicle pileup caused by black ice, just like you described. How did you know about it? I couldn't explain without sounding insane, so I made up a story about hearing it on the CB radio. But the details I remembered, the exact mile marker, the weather conditions, the specific vehicles involved all matched the official accident report. Over the next few days, I tried to understand what had happened at Stillwater. The medical evaluation showed nothing wrong, blood work normal, brain scans clear, no signs of neurological problems. The doctor, a young woman named Dr. Sarah Collins, had never seen anything like it. 72 hours of continuous sleep is medically impossible, she said. Your body should have awakened from dehydration alone, but all your vitals are normal, and you show no signs of extended unconsciousness. I returned to Stillwater the following week, this time prepared to document whatever was happening. I set up recording equipment in my cab, arranged for Eugene to check on me every few hours, and settled in for what I expected to be a normal 10-hour rest. I woke up 72 hours later with another set of impossible memories. This time, my phantom journey had taken me through Colorado, where I'd witnessed a fuel tanker roll over near Vail Pass. In my unconscious memories, I'd again helped coordinate emergency response, directing traffic around the accident scene until hazmat teams could secure the spill. When I called the Colorado State Patrol, they confirmed every detail. The accident had occurred exactly as I remembered it, during the hours I was unconscious in Montana. Eugene showed me the recordings from my cab. They showed me lying motionless in my bunk for 3 full days, breathing steadily, occasionally shifting position, but never truly waking. But at regular intervals, I would speak in my sleep clear, coherent conversations with dispatch, other drivers, emergency responders. You were coordinating something, Eugene said, giving directions, asking for updates, providing information about road conditions. But there was nobody there to talk to. The 3rd time it happened, I was ready. I'd arranged for Dr. Collins to monitor my vital signs remotely, and I'd convinced a documentary filmmaker named Janet Ross to record the entire 72-hour period. I wanted proof of what was happening, evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. This time, my phantom journey was different. Instead of witnessing accidents, I was preventing them. I had vivid memories of warning other drivers about a bridge washout on Highway 212, helping coordinate an alternate route that saved dozens of trucks from a potentially deadly situation. But when I called to verify the incident, I learned something that shook me to my core. The The bridge washout hadn't happened yet. It occurred the following day, exactly as I'd foreseen in my unconscious state. Janet's footage showed something that changed everything. During my third day of sleep, at exactly 3:17 a.m., every piece of electronic equipment in my truck activated simultaneously. The CB radio, GPS unit, cell phone, and electronic logging device all began transmitting data, communicating with systems and networks that shouldn't have been accessible. The data logs showed my truck's systems were connecting to traffic management networks, emergency response databases, and weather monitoring stations across 6 states. For those few hours, my unconscious mind was somehow interfacing with the entire transportation infrastructure of the American West. Dr. Collins reviewed the medical data and found patterns that defied explanation. During my deepest sleep phases, my brain showed activity levels consistent with intense concentration and problem solving. My heart rate and blood pressure fluctuated, as if I were experiencing real physical exertion, even though my body remained motionless. It's as if part of your consciousness is genuinely traveling while your body rests, she said. But that's scientifically impossible. I stopped going to Stillwater after the 4th incident. The phantom journeys were becoming more frequent and more intense, and I was starting to lose track of what was real and what was unconscious memory. But even avoiding that truck stop, I found myself falling into the same pattern at other locations. Long sleeps filled with impossible journeys, warnings about accidents that hadn't happened yet, conversations with people I'd never met. The last time it happened, I woke up with memories of my own funeral. In the phantom journey, I died in a rollover accident near Flagstaff, Arizona. I could remember the impact, the pain, the gradual fading of consciousness, but I also remembered standing beside my own body, watching the paramedics work, feeling a strange peace about the whole thing. 2 days later, I received a call from the Arizona Department of Transportation warning about dangerous crosswinds near Flagstaff. I canceled my scheduled run through that area and took a longer route through New Mexico instead. I don't know what's happening to me, or why my unconscious mind seems capable of experiencing events across time and space. But I've learned to listen to the warnings that come from those long sleeps, even as they pull me further from the world of normal waking consciousness. Sometimes I wonder if I'm still asleep at Stillwater Station, dreaming an entire life that feels real, but exists only in my sleeping mind, warning phantom drivers about dangers in a world that may not exist at all. My GPS keeps trying to send me to places that haven't existed for 50 years, and somehow I keep arriving on time. My name is Kevin O'Brien, and I've been an independent lease operator for 14 years. Started driving company trucks right out of college when my engineering degree couldn't land me steady work, and eventually saved enough to lease my own rig. Now I run a 2020 Freightliner Cascadia, forest green with gold lettering, hauling loads for whoever pays the best rates. It's not the most secure living, but it gives me freedom that office work never could. The lease operator game is all about efficiency, finding the best loads, taking the shortest routes, minimizing deadhead miles. Every unnecessary mile costs money, and every delay can mean the difference between profit and loss. That's why I invested in the best GPS system money could buy, a Garmin unit with real-time traffic updates, construction alerts, and routing optimized for commercial vehicles. The Badlands Rest Area on Interstate 90 sits in one of the most desolate stretches of South Dakota, surrounded by eroded hills and sparse grassland that extends to the horizon. It's a basic facility, restrooms, picnic tables, and parking for maybe a dozen trucks. Most drivers only stop there out of necessity, when they need to take their mandatory rest break, and it's the only option for miles. I pulled in there on the afternoon of June 7th, 2024, after delivering agricultural equipment to Rapid City. I had a few hours to kill before my next pickup in Minnesota, so I decided to grab some rest and review potential backhaul loads on my tablet. The June heat was oppressive, temperature pushing into the 90s, and the air conditioning in my sleeper berth was a welcome relief. While browsing load boards, I noticed my GPS displaying an unusual message. New route available to optimized pickup location. The screen showed a destination I'd never heard of, Wagon Wheel Truck Plaza in Murdo, South Dakota. According to the GPS, it was 37 miles south of my current location, and there was a high-paying load waiting for pickup. I'd been through Murdo dozens of times over the years, and had never seen a truck plaza called the Wagon Wheel. But the GPS was insistent, showing detailed turn-by-turn directions, and even displaying a photo of what appeared to be a large truck stop with multiple fuel islands and a restaurant. The load details looked legitimate electronics heading to Denver, paying $2.50 per mile. Good money for a straightforward haul. I decided to investigate, figuring I could always turn around if the location didn't exist. The GPS directed me off Interstate 90 at exit 192, then south on a state highway I'd traveled many times before. But after about 15 miles, it instructed me to turn onto a road I didn't recognize, a well-maintained asphalt highway that curved through rolling hills toward what appeared to be a substantial commercial development. As I crested a hill, the Wagon Wheel Truck Plaza spread out before me exactly as shown in the GPS photo. It was massive, at least 20 fuel islands, a restaurant, a truck wash, and parking for over 100 rigs. The architecture looked distinctly 70s, with brown brick facades and orange signage, but the facility appeared to be in excellent condition. The parking lot was busy with activity. Dozens of trucks, mostly older models I recognized from the 1970s and 80s Peterbilts with long hoods, Kenworths with classic styling, Freightliners from the pre-aerodynamic era. Drivers in vintage clothing moved between the rigs, and the air was filled with the sounds of diesel engines and air brakes. I parked near the shipping office and climbed down from my cab. The heat hit me immediately, but there was something off about the quality of the light. It had a sepia tone, like an old photograph. The smells were different too. Leaded gasoline, cigarette smoke, and cooking oil, with an underlying mustiness I couldn't identify. Inside the shipping office, a middle-aged woman with feathered hair and a polyester uniform handed me a bill of lading for Consolidated Electronics Corporation, a company I'd never heard of. The paperwork looked authentic, complete with shipper and receiver information, but the carbon copy forms and manual typewriting seemed anachronistic. "You're right on time, driver," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dock 7 is ready for you." The loading process was efficient but strange. The dock workers wore clothing that looked like it belonged in a museum bell-bottom jeans, wide-collared shirts, safety equipment that predated modern standards. The electronics they loaded into my trailer were packaged in boxes with vintage graphics and product names I didn't recognize. But the strangest part was the other drivers. They were friendly enough, waving and making small talk about road conditions and fuel prices, but their conversations referenced events from decades ago. Presidential elections I'd learned about in history class, TV shows that went off the air before I was born, truck stops and highways that had been demolished or rerouted years earlier. One driver, a man in his 60s, wearing a trucker hat with a CB radio manufacturer's logo I didn't recognize, struck up a conversation while I was securing my load. "You heading east on the old 80? He asked. "Watch out for that construction project near the Missouri River. They've got traffic backed up for miles." I knew Interstate 80 through South Dakota well, and there was no construction near the Missouri River. In fact, the highway he was describing followed a route that had been changed in the early 1990s when they rebuilt that section. "I think you might be thinking of a different area," I said. He looked at me with confusion. "Son, I've been running this route since 1972. I know every mile of it." After loading, I tried to pay for fuel, but my credit cards wouldn't work in their system. The attendant, a young man with sideburns and a vintage uniform, looked at my cards with bewilderment. "What are these plastic things?" he asked. "We only take cash or company cards." I paid with the $50 cash I keep for emergencies, though the fuel prices were about what you'd expect to pay in the mid-70s. As I was leaving, I noticed my GPS was directing me along highways that didn't match my usual routes. The roads it showed existed, but they followed alignments that had been changed decades ago. The drive to Denver took me through landscapes that seemed subtly wrong. Towns I'd passed through many times looked different, older, smaller, with businesses and signs from previous eras. The other trucks on the road were predominantly vintage models, and the drivers who responded to my CB calls spoke in the jargon and references of earlier decades. When I arrived at the delivery address in Denver, I found an empty lot. No warehouse, no receiving dock, just cracked pavement and weeds. The bill of lading showed a legitimate address, but according to my phone's map application, the business had closed in 1979. I called my dispatcher, trying to explain what had happened. Jerry Kowalski had been coordinating my loads for 8 years, and he knew I wasn't prone to flights of fancy. "Kevin, I don't have any record of you picking up a load today," he said. "Your GPS tracker shows you've been stationary at the Badlands rest area for the past 6 hours. "That's impossible, Jerry. I'm standing in Denver right now, next to a load that doesn't exist, after picking up from a truck stop that shouldn't be there. Your electronic logs show the same thing. You've been on a rest break since 2 p.m. No driving time recorded." I checked my own electronic logging device, and Jerry was right. According to the federal record, I hadn't moved from the rest area, but I had clear memories of the entire trip, and my fuel gauge showed I'd burned nearly a full tank of diesel. Over the next few weeks, I tried to research the Wagon Wheel Truck Plaza. What I found in old trucking magazines and historical records made my experiences even more disturbing. The Wagon Wheel had existed, operating from 1971 to 1978, before closing when Interstate 90 was rerouted. The facility had been demolished in 1982, and the access road had been abandoned. But other drivers started reporting similar experiences. Independent operators would describe getting GPS directions to pick up locations that existed only in trucking industry archives. They'd arrive at abandoned facilities that appeared fully operational, load cargo for companies that had been out of business for decades, and deliver to addresses that were now empty lots. The most disturbing reports came from drivers on CB radio. They claimed to see vintage trucks traveling on highway segments that had been demolished in the 80s and 90s, following routes that existed only in old atlases. Some reported extended conversations with drivers who claimed to be running loads for companies that had closed before the CB operators were born. I stopped following my GPS when it directed me to phantom locations. But sometimes, when I'm driving the lonely stretches of highway through the Badlands, the device will activate on its own, showing routes to truck stops that closed decades ago, offering loads for companies that exist only in the faded memories of the American trucking industry. And sometimes, late at night when the CB crackles with distant voices, I hear drivers calling out locations and asking for directions to places I know I've been, even though they haven't existed for 50 years. I want to respond, to help them find their way, but I'm afraid that if I answer, I might never find my way back to a world where the roads lead somewhere real. I've been having conversations with myself on Channel 19 for the past 6 months, and I'm starting to realize I'm changing things that already happened. My name is Michelle Torres, and I've been an owner-operator for 17 years. Started driving when my youngest daughter entered high school, and I needed better money than the office job could provide. Built up a solid reputation running specialized freight, oversized loads, hazardous materials, time-sensitive deliveries that require experienced hands. My rig is a 2018 Peterbilt 389, midnight blue with silver trim, equipped with every safety feature and communication device available. The CB radio has always been essential equipment for truckers. We use it to coordinate with other drivers, share road conditions, and maintain that sense of community that keeps us sane during long hauls. My Cobra 29 with a high-gain antenna has been with me for over a decade, and I know its quirks and capabilities better than any other piece of equipment in my cab. Thunderbolt Ridge Scenic Overlook on Highway 191 sits high in the Utah mountains, offering a spectacular view of Red Rock canyons and distant mesas. It's a small rest area with maybe 6 parking spaces for trucks, but the elevation and clear air make it perfect for CB radio transmission. Signals carry for hundreds of miles from that location, and drivers often stop there just to check in with dispatch or coordinate with other trucks running the same routes. I'd been using Thunderbolt Ridge as a regular breakpoint for 8 years, always pulling in around the same time during my monthly runs between Phoenix and Salt Lake City. The routine was comforting 10 minutes to check my load, update my logs, and scan the CB channels for traffic information ahead. The first time I heard my own voice, I thought it was another driver with similar speech patterns and vocal tone. It was July 15th, 2024, around 3 p.m., and I was stopped at the overlook during my usual Phoenix to Salt Lake run. Breaker 19. This is Desert Rose eastbound on 191 at mile marker 47. Got a report of black ice ahead near the Flaming Gorge turnoff. Desert Rose had been my CB handle for over a decade. The voice was unmistakably mine. Same inflection, same phrasing, same slight accent from my childhood in New Mexico. But I was sitting in my cab at mile marker 47, and I hadn't made any transmissions. I grabbed the microphone. Desert Rose, this is Desert Rose at your 20. Say again, your location? Static filled the channel. Then, after several seconds, Desert Rose, you copy that ice warning? Saw 3 cars in the ditch between miles 52 and 54. Might want to back it down through there. The conversation continued for nearly 10 minutes, me talking to myself about road conditions, weather patterns, and traffic hazards. The other Desert Rose seemed to have detailed knowledge of the route ahead, describing construction zones and accident scenes with precision that suggested recent first-hand observation. But here's what made it impossible. I checked my CB transmission log, and it showed no outgoing signals. I was only receiving, not transmitting. Yet both sides of the conversation were clearly my voice. When I reached the Flaming Gorge area, I found exactly what my other self had described. Fresh skid marks and damaged guardrails, indicating recent accidents caused by unexpected ice. Road crews were still clearing debris, and a highway patrol officer confirmed that 3 vehicles had slid off the road earlier that afternoon. Lucky you got the warning, Trooper Janet Riley said when I stopped to ask about conditions ahead. Saved you from joining them in the ditch. Who gave you the warning? She asked. I couldn't explain without sounding delusional, so I made up a story about monitoring traffic reports. But the timing bothered me. The accidents had occurred around noon, yet my phantom conversation had happened 3 hours later, describing them as if they were current events. The phenomenon repeated itself over the next several months. Every time I stopped at Thunderbolt Ridge, my CB would receive transmissions from Desert Rose, always my own voice, always discussing road hazards and safety information, always providing details that proved accurate when I encountered them later. The conversations became more complex over time. My other self would reference specific trucks, mention drivers by name, and provide detailed updates about mechanical problems and emergency situations. In October, during a particularly intense exchange, the other Desert Rose warned me about a fuel tanker that had jackknifed near mile marker 63. Desert Rose, that Peterbilt hauling diesel just lost it on the curve, my voice said through the speaker. Drivers unconscious, fuel spilling across both lanes. Better find an alternate route. When I reached mile marker 63 20 minutes later, I found the accident exactly as described. But the timeline was wrong again. According to the responding officers, the tanker had crashed 2 hours earlier, well before my phantom conversation began. I started documenting every incident, recording the CB conversations, and comparing them to official accident reports. The pattern that emerged was deeply unsettling. My other self was providing warnings about accidents that had already happened, but somehow the timing of my responses seemed to be influencing their outcomes. In November, I decided to investigate further. I contacted Dr. Sarah Kim, a physicist at the University of Utah, who specialized in electromagnetic phenomena. After reviewing my recordings and documentation, she agreed to accompany me to Thunderbolt Ridge with monitoring equipment. The elevation and geological composition create unique radio propagation conditions, Dr. A. Kim explained as we set up her instruments. It's possible you're receiving signals that have been reflected or refracted through atmospheric layers, creating temporal displacement. At 3:17 p.m., right on schedule, my CB crackled to life with the familiar sound of my own voice. Desert Rose. This is Desert Rose, westbound, at mile marker 39. We've got a problem here. That blue Kenworth just blew a steer tire and crossed the median. EMS is en route, but traffic is backing up fast. Dr. Kim's equipment showed electromagnetic anomalies unlike anything in her experience. The radio signals were originating from my exact location, but according to her instruments, they were somehow arriving before they were transmitted. This is impossible, she muttered, studying the readouts. The signal is exhibiting negative time delay. It's reaching your radio before it leaves the source. The conversation continued for 30 minutes, my phantom self providing detailed updates about the accident response and traffic management. But when we drove to mile marker 39, we found no accident, no emergency response, no traffic delays. Dr. Kim checked with the Highway Patrol and found records of the exact incident described in my CB conversation, but it had occurred 6 months earlier, during my April trip through the same area. The temporal displacement is consistent, she said, reviewing her data. Your radio is somehow receiving transmissions from your own past trips, but the content suggests you're also transmitting information back to those earlier time periods. The implications were staggering. If Dr. Kim was correct, my phantom conversations weren't just echoes of past events. They were active communications across time, allowing me to warn my earlier self about hazards that hadn't occurred yet from her perspective. Over the next few weeks, I researched the accident reports from my previous trips through Highway 191. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Many of the accidents I'd warned myself about had originally been much worse. According to revised police reports, fatalities had become injuries, multi-vehicle pileups had become single-car accidents, and catastrophic incidents had been reduced to minor fender benders. The changes were subtle but consistent. Someone, apparently me, had been altering the timeline of traffic accidents, using impossible CB radio communications to prevent deaths and reduce injuries. But each change created ripple effects that I couldn't predict or control. The last time I stopped at Thunderbolt Ridge, my phantom conversation was different. Instead of traffic warnings, the other Desert Rose was trying to tell me something else. Michelle, you need to stop coming here. Every time you change something, it creates problems somewhere else. People who were supposed to die are still alive, and that's affecting things you can't imagine. I don't stop at Thunderbolt Ridge anymore. I take a different route between Phoenix and Salt Lake City, adding 2 hours to my drive time to avoid that scenic overlook and its impossible radio propagation. But sometimes, when I'm monitoring Channel 19 late at night, I hear my own voice calling out warnings about accidents I prevented years ago, still trying to save lives across time, still changing things that were meant to happen. And sometimes I wonder how many other drivers are receiving warnings from themselves, creating an invisible network of temporal communications that's quietly rewriting the history of American highways, one prevented accident at a time. The countdown timer on my dashboard shows I have 17 minutes and 43 seconds left to live, and I know exactly what's going to kill me. My name is Frank Morrison, and I've been driving trucks for 28 years. Started when I was 23, right after my discharge from the Army, and I've been with the same company, Mountain West Freight, for the past 15 years. It's steady work with good benefits, And at 51, I'm not looking to make any career changes. My truck is a 2022 Freightliner Cascadia, company-owned and maintained, equipped with all the latest electronic systems and safety features. The onboard computer manages everything from fuel efficiency to maintenance schedules, displaying information on a dashboard screen that's become as familiar to me as my own reflection. Engine temperature, oil pressure, GPS navigation, electronic logging, all the data a modern trucker needs is right there in digital format. Copper Canyon Travel Center on Interstate 10 sits in the heart of the Arizona desert, surrounded by saguaro cacti and rocky hills that glow red in the setting sun. It's a major truck stop with over 60 fuel islands, a full-service restaurant, and parking for more than 200 rigs. I've been stopping there regularly for over a decade, usually during my Phoenix to El Paso runs when I need to take my mandatory 10-hour rest break. I pulled in there on the evening of August 3rd, 2024, hauling automotive parts from Tempe to Houston. The August heat was brutal, temperature still over 100 degrees at 8 p.m., but the truck's air conditioning kept the cab comfortable. I parked in space 127, completed my post-trip inspection, and settled in for the night. Around 10:30 p.m., while updating my electronic logs, I noticed something odd on my dashboard display. Below the usual information panels, a new window had appeared, showing what looked like a countdown timer. 7, 42, 33, and decreasing by the second. I'd never seen this display before, and it wasn't mentioned in any of the truck's documentation. I assumed it was some kind of maintenance reminder or software update notification. But when I tried to close the window or access its settings, the display remained fixed, counting down relentlessly. At 7, 42, 33, I heard the sound of grinding metal and hydraulic failure from somewhere in the truck lot. Through my windshield, I could see a blue Peterbilt about 50 yards away. The driver was attempting to raise his landing gear, but something had failed mechanically. Sparks flew from under his trailer as the gear mechanism seized, and I could hear him cursing over the CB radio. The timer had predicted the exact moment of his equipment failure. As I watched the other driver deal with his mechanical problem, a new countdown appeared on my display. 2, 14, 17. This time, I paid closer attention to the numbers, noting the steady decrease and wondering what would happen when it reached 0. 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 17 seconds later, I heard the distinctive sound of a tire blowout, a loud bang, followed by the screech of brakes and the hiss of escaping air. A red Kenworth 3 spaces over from my location had suffered a steer tire failure. The driver climbed down from his cab, flashlight in hand, examining the shredded rubber with obvious frustration. Again, the timer had been accurate to the second. Over the next few hours, my dashboard displayed a series of countdown timers, each corresponding to mechanical failures, minor accidents, or equipment malfunctions experienced by other truckers in the parking lot. A refrigeration unit failure at 1, 33, 45. A fifth wheel pin problem at 0, 47, 12. An air brake malfunction at 3, 22, 8. Every prediction was perfectly accurate. By morning, I'd witnessed 7 different incidents, all timed precisely by the mysterious countdown display. I tried to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe the computer was somehow monitoring radio frequencies or electronic signals from other trucks, analyzing patterns to predict failures. But the technology required for such predictions was beyond anything I'd ever heard of. The real test came during my next stop at Copper Canyon, a week later. This time, I decided to intervene. The countdown showed 0, 23, 47, and based on the pattern I'd observed, I knew someone was about to experience a serious problem. I grabbed my CB microphone and made a general announcement. Attention all drivers at Copper Canyon Travel Center. This is Frank Morrison in Space 127. I've got reason to believe someone's about to have equipment trouble. Might want to double check your rigs, brakes, tires, electrical systems. Several drivers responded, acknowledging the warning and agreeing to perform additional inspections. As the timer approached 0, I heard increased activity in the lot drivers, checking their equipment, testing systems, examining components more carefully than usual. At 0, 0, 0, nothing happened. The predicted incident had been prevented by my warning, but within seconds of the timer reaching 0, a new countdown appeared on my display, and this one made my blood run cold. 0, 0, 47. 47 seconds. Not enough time to shut down my engine, set my brakes, or prepare for whatever was coming. At exactly 47 seconds, my truck's electrical system failed completely. Lights went out, engine shut down, dashboard went dark. I was stranded in my parking space with a dead truck and no way to call for assistance. The pattern became clear over the following weeks. Each time I successfully warned other drivers and prevented their mechanical failures, the countdown system would reset and target me instead. It was as if some cosmic balance required a certain number of equipment failures, and preventing them only redirected the problems to my truck. I began keeping detailed records of each incident, documenting the countdown times, the predicted failures, and the outcomes of my interventions. The data revealed a disturbing truth. I could save other drivers from mechanical problems, but only by accepting those problems myself. The moral calculus was brutal. Should I warn a driver about an impending tire blowout that might cause a serious accident, knowing it would cause my own steering system to fail? Should I prevent someone else's brake failure at the cost of my own engine problems? The decision became even more complex when the countdown timers began displaying longer periods, hours, instead of minutes. These extended timers corresponded to more serious incidents, accidents, injuries, situations where a mechanical failure could result in loss of life. On September 15th, my dashboard showed a countdown of 4, 17, 33. Based on the pattern, this was going to be a significant event. I spent the 4 hours watching other drivers, trying to identify who might be in danger. At exactly 4, 17, 33, I watched a yellow Freightliner in Space 89 suffer what appeared to be a complete brake failure as the driver attempted to leave his parking spot. The truck rolled across the lot, gaining speed, heading directly toward the fuel islands where several drivers were refueling their rigs. I grabbed my CB microphone and shouted warnings, alerting everyone in the path of the runaway truck. Drivers scattered, jumping clear of the potential collision. The Freightliner eventually came to rest against a concrete barrier, causing property damage but no injuries. Within seconds of the incident, my countdown display showed 0, 0, 12. 12 seconds wasn't enough time to do anything except watch my own brake system fail completely. But this time, the failure occurred while I was stationary and safe. The cosmic balance had been satisfied with a mechanical problem rather than a potential tragedy. I realized I'd been given a terrible gift, the ability to prevent accidents and save lives, but only by accepting personal risk and mechanical failures. Each intervention was a moral choice. My safety versus that of strangers. My convenience versus their potential tragedy. The timer on my dashboard now shows 0, 17, 43 and counting down. In 17 minutes and 43 seconds, something is going to happen to me, something serious enough to balance whatever tragedy I prevented with my last warning. I don't know what it will be. Engine failure, brake problems, steering malfunction, but I know it's coming, and I know I chose it by saving someone else from the same fate. The choice wasn't really a choice at all, because that's what truckers do. We look out for each other on the road, even when it costs us everything we have. The voices on Channel 19 have been warning me about accidents that haven't happened yet, and I'm starting to realize they're the voices of the dead. My name is Rebecca Lawson, and I've been team driving with my partner Carl Stevens for 9 years. We run a 2021 Freightliner Cascadia with a double sleeper berth, hauling time-sensitive freight across the western states for a logistics company based in Denver. Team driving means we can keep the truck moving 24 hours a day. One sleeps while the other drives, maximizing efficiency and income. Carl and I have developed the kind of partnership that only comes from thousands of miles together, coordinating seamlessly through traffic, weather, and the endless challenges of long-haul trucking. The CB radio is essential equipment for team drivers. We use it to communicate with each other when one of us is sleeping, coordinate with dispatch, and monitor traffic conditions ahead. Our Cobra 29 with a high-gain antenna has been with us since we started teaming, and we know every nuance of its operation. Windfall Gap Truck Stop on Highway 40 sits high in the Colorado Rockies, surrounded by pine forests and granite peaks that create unique radio propagation conditions. It's a small facility, maybe 20 parking spaces and basic amenities, but the elevation makes it perfect for long-range CB communication. Signals carry for hundreds of miles from that location, and drivers often stop there specifically to check in with distant contacts. The first warning came on September 10th, 2024, around midnight. Carl was sleeping in the bunk while I drove our load of electronics from Salt Lake City to Kansas City. I'd stopped at Windfall Gap for fuel and a quick break when my CB crackled with an unfamiliar voice. Breaker 19, this is Phantom Freight with a heads up for eastbound traffic. Got a nasty situation developing at mile marker 212 on I-70. Fuel tanker lost control in the curve, spilled diesel across both lanes. Fire department's en route, but it's going to be a mess for hours. I grabbed the microphone immediately. Team drivers depend on road condition reports to plan their routes and maintain schedules. Phantom Freight. This is Mountain Express eastbound on Highway 40. What's your 20? And when did that spill occur? Static filled the channel for several seconds. Then, Mountain Express. This is happening right now. Flames shooting 50 feet in the air, both lanes blocked. Traffic backing up for miles. You'll want to take alternate route through Denver. But when I checked with the Colorado Department of Transportation, they had no reports of any incidents on Interstate 70. Traffic cams showed normal flow. No accidents. No emergency response. I figured Phantom Freight had his location wrong, or was reporting an old incident. 24 hours later, at mile marker 212 on Interstate 70, a fuel tanker lost control in the curve and spilled diesel across both lanes. The explosion sent flames 50 feet into the air, blocked both lanes for 6 hours, and created traffic backups for miles. Every detail matched the warning I'd received exactly 1 day earlier. The phenomenon repeated itself over the next several weeks. Anonymous voices on Channel 19 would provide detailed warnings about accidents, weather conditions, and road hazards, always 24 hours before the events occurred. The information was consistently accurate, specific locations, precise timing, exact details that proved correct when the incidents actually happened. The voices used CB handles I didn't recognize. Phantom Freight, Ghost Rider, Final Mile, Last Call. Their transmissions were often accompanied by static and interference that suggested long-distance propagation, but the content was too specific and accurate to be random chatter from distant stations. In October, the warnings became more personal. A voice calling himself Highway Angel provided a detailed alert about a brake failure I would experience near Vail Pass. Mountain Express. This is Highway Angel with an urgent safety message. Your front brake system is developing a slow leak in the left wheel cylinder. You'll notice pulling to the right around mile marker 185 tomorrow evening. Get it checked before you hit the mountain grades. 24 hours later, at mile marker 185, I felt my truck pulling to the right during braking. Inspection revealed exactly what Highway Angel had described. A slow leak in the left front wheel cylinder that could have caused complete brake failure on the steep mountain grades ahead. Carl witnessed this warning and its fulfillment, confirming that I wasn't imagining the transmissions. But when he tried to respond to the anonymous voices, they never acknowledged his communications. They seemed to be broadcasting information specifically for me. I began documenting every warning, recording the CB transmissions and tracking their accuracy. The pattern was consistent. Anonymous truckers providing detailed safety information exactly 24 hours before the events occurred. But something about the voices bothered me. They spoke with an urgency that suggested immediate danger, describing events as if they were happening in real time, rather than predicting future incidents. In November, I decided to investigate the CB handles being used by my mysterious informants. What I found in Department of Transportation accident records made my blood freeze. Phantom Freight was the CB handle of Dale Morrison, a 47-year-old driver who died in a fuel tanker explosion at mile marker 212 on Interstate 70 3 years earlier. The accident report matched exactly the warning I'd received. About the same location, Ghost Rider belonged to Tommy Chen, killed in a brake failure accident near Vale Pass 2 years ago. His truck had suffered a left front wheel cylinder failure, identical to what Highway Angel had warned me about. Highway Angel was the handle of Maria Santos, a team driver who died in a rollover accident on Highway 40, exactly 1 year before I started receiving the warnings. Every voice that had provided safety information was a trucker who had died in accidents, matching the hazards they were warning me about. They were somehow transmitting their final observations across time, trying to prevent other drivers from suffering the same fates. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. I was receiving the last transmissions of dead truckers, their final attempts to warn other drivers about the dangers that had killed them. Carl and I returned to Windfall Gap in December, equipped with recording equipment and a frequency scanner. I wanted to understand how these impossible communications were reaching me and why I seemed to be the only one receiving them. At 11:47 p.m., my CB crackled with a new voice, one that made my hands shake as I reached for the microphone. Mountain Express, this is Final Mile. Rebecca, I need you to listen carefully. Tomorrow night, December 15th, at mile marker 93 on Highway 40, you're going to lose your steering in a curve during a snowstorm. The truck will roll 3 times before hitting the trees. Carl won't survive the impact. The voice was mine, my own voice, speaking my partner's name, describing our deaths with the clinical precision I'd come to associate with the phantom warnings. Who is this? I demanded into the microphone. This is Rebecca Lawson, transmitting from December 15th, 2025. I died at 9:23 p.m., trying to warn other drivers about the black ice at mile marker 93. But maybe, if you're hearing this, I can still save Carl. The transmission continued for nearly an hour, my future self, providing detailed information about road conditions, weather patterns, and the specific mechanical failure that would cause our accident. She described the moments leading up to the crash with devastating accuracy, the sound of tearing metal, the sensation of rolling. Carl's final words: "You have to change the route, Rebecca. Take Interstate 25 through Denver instead of Highway 40. Check the steering system before you leave Colorado Springs." And Rebecca, tell Carl I'm sorry I couldn't save him. Carl had been listening to the entire transmission, his face pale in the dashboard lights. "That was your voice," he whispered. "That was you, talking about our deaths." We changed our route, had the steering system inspected, and avoided Highway 40 entirely on December 15th. The Colorado Department of Transportation confirmed severe weather and black ice conditions at mile marker 93 that night, exactly as my future self had warned. But now I understand the terrible truth about the voices on Channel 19. They're not just warnings about future accidents, they're the final transmissions of truckers who died trying to prevent those accidents, their last desperate attempts to save others from the fates they couldn't escape themselves. And somewhere in the future, another Rebecca Lawson is transmitting warnings back through time, trying to prevent accidents she couldn't avoid, adding her voice to the chorus of the dead who still watch over the living on America's highways. I've been delivering cargo that doesn't exist to places that aren't there. And according to the security cameras, I do it with the precision of someone who's been making these impossible runs for years. My name is Thomas Kim, and I immigrated to the United States from South Korea in 2008. Started driving trucks 3 years later when my engineering degree wasn't recognized here, and I needed work that paid enough to support my family. Trucking gave me the independence and income I needed while I learned American business customs and improved my English. Now, 16 years later, I own my rig, a 2019 Volvo VNL, with over 400,000 miles, and I run specialized freight for companies that need reliable, experienced drivers. The paperwork is everything in trucking. Bills of lading, cargo manifests, delivery receipts. Every load requires precise documentation for legal and insurance purposes. I keep meticulous records, filed chronologically in a folder behind my driver's seat. After years of dealing with complex shipping regulations, I've developed systems that ensure every document is accurate and every delivery is properly documented. Sagebrush Travel Plaza on Highway 84 sits in the high desert of southern Idaho, surrounded by rolling hills covered in sagebrush and sparse grass. It's a medium-sized truck stop with 30 fuel islands and parking for about 80 rigs. I've been stopping there regularly for 8 years, usually during my runs between Portland and Salt Lake City. The staff knows me. The fuel prices are competitive, and it's positioned perfectly for mandatory rest breaks. I pulled in there on the afternoon of October 20th, 2024, hauling machine parts from Seattle to Denver. After fueling and completing my post-trip inspection, I climbed into my sleeper berth to organize my paperwork before continuing south. That's when I found the first impossible manifest. It was mixed in with my legitimate shipping documents, a standard bill of lading for Precision Optical Instruments, consigned from Advanced Photonics Corporation to Desert Research Facility. The delivery address was listed as Milepost 14, Highway 127, Craters of the Moon, Idaho. The manifest showed a pickup date of October 19th, the previous day, with my signature and truck number clearly documented. I had never heard of Advanced Photonics Corporation. I had never picked up optical instruments, and I had never been to the Craters of the Moon area. Yet the paperwork was authentic looking, complete with all required signatures, stamps, and tracking numbers. I assumed someone had accidentally mixed their documents with mine, though I couldn't understand how it had gotten into my carefully organized filing system. I set the manifest aside and continued south toward Denver, planning to dispose of it at the next truck stop. But over the following weeks, more phantom manifests appeared in my truck, always for companies I'd never heard of, always documenting deliveries to remote locations in the high desert of Idaho, Nevada, and Utah. The addresses were specific but led to empty fields, abandoned mining claims, or coordinates that corresponded to nothing but sagebrush and rocks. The most disturbing aspect was that all the manifests bore my signature, not forged or copied, but written in my own hand, with the distinctive flourishes and pressure patterns I'd developed over years of signing shipping documents. In November, curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate one of the phantom delivery addresses. A manifest for geological survey equipment listed a delivery location at 37.4 miles north of Ely, Nevada, County Road 15. I adjusted my route to pass through the area, expecting to find nothing but empty desert. Instead, I found tire tracks, fresh tracks from a heavy truck leading from the county road into the desert, ending at a cleared area where the ground showed signs of recent activity. Something large and heavy had been unloaded there, based on the depression patterns in the sandy soil, but there was nothing at the location. No equipment, no buildings, no signs of current activity, just tire tracks and disturbed earth suggesting a delivery had been made to an empty field. I began carrying a small video camera, documenting my routes and stops to prove I wasn't making mysterious deliveries during blackouts or periods of confusion. The footage showed normal trucking activities, fuel stops, rest breaks, routine inspections. But the phantom manifests continued to appear, and the tire tracks at remote delivery locations suggested someone was making these impossible runs. The truth emerged when I contacted the Idaho Department of Transportation about security cameras along Highway 84. Officer Janet Walsh reviewed footage from the Sagebrush Travel Plaza and found something that made my hands shake when she showed me the recordings. "This is you, Mr. Kim," she said, pointing to the screen. "October 21st, 3:17 a.m. You're backing up to what appears to be a loading dock that isn't visible on camera." The footage showed my truck in the Travel Plaza parking lot, but positioned as if there were facilities that didn't exist. I watched myself climb down from the cab, walk to the trailer, and begin what looked like an unloading procedure. For nearly an hour, the camera captured me methodically removing cargo from my trailer, opening doors, operating equipment, directing the placement of items I couldn't see. "The strange part," Officer Walsh continued, "is that other trucks in the lot show no reaction to your activities. It's as if you're interacting with something that's invisible to everyone else." She showed me additional footage from cameras along Highway 84. The recordings consistently showed my truck following routes that appeared normal, but at specific locations, I would pull off the road and perform elaborate unloading procedures at empty fields and abandoned sites. "In this footage from mile marker 47, she explained, "you spend 2 hours at what appears to be a non-existent loading dock. Your truck is positioned precisely, and you're using equipment to move cargo, but the cameras show nothing but empty desert." Other drivers began reporting similar observations. CB radio chatter included descriptions of my truck traveling with what appeared to be phantom freight carriers, additional trucks that were visible in mirrors, but disappeared when drivers turned for direct observation. "I've been seeing Kim's rig, followed by 2 or 3 other trucks," reported driver Alan Hayes. "Classic freight haulers, the kind you see in old trucking magazines. But when I try to get a good look at them, they're just gone." The pattern intensified through December. I would arrive at truck stops with manifests for loads I'd never picked up, documenting deliveries to locations that corresponded to real coordinates but empty destinations. Security cameras showed me performing complex unloading operations with invisible cargo at sites where nothing existed. The final incident occurred on December 18th at a remote location in Utah. A manifest in my truck documented the delivery of archival storage containers to Historical Preservation Site 47, Bonneville Salt Flats Access Road. I drove to the coordinates out of morbid curiosity, expecting to find the usual empty desert. Instead, I found myself backing up to what felt like a loading dock I couldn't see. For the first time, I experienced the phantom unloading procedure consciously. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, operating equipment I couldn't perceive, directing the placement of cargo that existed only as weight and resistance. For 3 hours, I methodically unloaded my trailer at a facility that existed in some dimension parallel to the visible world. I could feel the cargo, its weight, texture, and dimensions, but I couldn't see it. I could sense the receiving dock, the supervision of invisible personnel, the completion of delivery procedures, but my eyes showed only empty desert. When the unloading was complete, I found a signed delivery receipt in my hand, my own signature acknowledging the successful completion of a shipment to a place that didn't exist. I don't know why. I've been chosen to serve as a bridge between the visible world of commercial trucking and whatever parallel freight network exists in the spaces between reality. The phantom manifests continue to appear in my truck, documenting deliveries I make while unconscious to destinations that exist only in the dimensions where invisible cargo needs to be moved. Sometimes, late at night when I'm driving the empty highways of the high desert, I catch glimpses of the other trucks in my mirrors, the phantom freight carriers that follow my route, carrying their own impossible loads to destinations that don't appear on any map, but somehow require the services of drivers who operate in the spaces between what we can see and what needs to be delivered. My electronic logs show I've been having detailed conversations with dispatch for the past 6 months, scheduling pickups at locations where drivers vanish and are never seen again. My name is Patricia Johnson, everyone calls me Patty, and I've been driving trucks for 27 years. Started when I was 23 and needed work that paid enough to raise my 2 kids alone. Built up a reputation for reliability and safety over the decades, never missing a delivery date, never having an accident. I drive a 2020 Freightliner Cascadia, forest green with gold lettering, owned by Plains Transport out of Topeka. After nearly 3 decades on the road, I know every truck stop, every dispatcher, and every major shipping route across the Midwest. Electronic logging devices are federally mandated. Now, they track our driving time, rest periods, and location data to ensure compliance with hours of service regulations. The device in my truck also records communications with dispatch, phone calls, and any interactions with the company's freight management system. It's all automated, creating an objective record of every aspect of my work. Devil's Backbone Rest Stop on Highway 83 sits in the heart of Kansas wheat country, surrounded by flat fields that stretch to the horizon in every direction. It's a small facility, maybe 8 parking spaces for trucks, basic restrooms, and a few picnic tables. Most drivers only stop there out of necessity, when they need a break, and it's the only option for 30 miles in either direction. I pulled in there on the evening of November 5th, 2024, after delivering grain equipment to a farm near Hayes. I had a few hours before my next pickup in Salina, so I decided to update my electronic logs and review the load assignments for the following week. That's when I noticed the first anomaly in my electronic records. The device showed a communication log entry from 3:47 p.m. that afternoon, a detailed conversation with dispatch about a pickup at Crossroads Distribution Center, mile marker 47, Highway 163. The conversation included specific instructions about handling procedures, delivery schedules, and special requirements for the cargo. I had no memory of this conversation. I checked my phone records, reviewed my notes, and examined every document in my cab. There was no mention of Crossroads Distribution Center anywhere, and Highway 163 wasn't a route I recognized. When I called dispatch to clarify the assignment, the night supervisor, Gary Hutchins, sounded confused. "Patty, I don't show any communications with you today after your morning check-in, and we don't have any pickups scheduled for Crossroads Distribution." "Gary, my electronic logs show a detailed conversation at 3:47 p.m., specific instructions about cargo handling, delivery requirements, the whole works." "That's impossible. I've been on duty since noon, and nobody here has talked to you." I forwarded the electronic log data to Gary, and he confirmed that the conversation had been recorded in my device, but not in the company's dispatch system. According to their records, no such communication had occurred. Over the next few weeks, more phantom dispatch conversations appeared in my electronic logs. Always detailed discussions about pickups at locations I'd never heard of, deliveries to addresses that didn't appear on any map, cargo descriptions that made no sense for legitimate freight. The most disturbing pattern was that many of these phantom pickups were scheduled for locations where other drivers had disappeared. Mile marker 47 on Highway 163 was the last known location of driver Wayne Collins, who'd vanished 3 years earlier. Riverside Junction on County Road 12 was where Maria Gonzalez had been headed when she disappeared in 2021. In December, curiosity and growing unease led me to investigate one of the phantom pickup locations. My electronic logs showed a conversation scheduling a pickup at Prairie Wind Truck Plaza, Interstate Junction 15, Highway 244. The facility appeared on my GPS unit, showing fuel islands, a restaurant, and overnight parking. I followed the GPS directions through increasingly remote farm roads, eventually reaching what appeared to be a fully operational truck stop. Prairie Wind Truck Plaza looked exactly as my GPS had indicated. Multiple fuel islands, a large restaurant building, and parking for dozens of trucks. But something was wrong with the facility. The architecture looked outdated, like something from the 1970s or 80s. The fuel pumps were vintage models. The signage had a faded, nostalgic quality, and the few trucks in the lot were older models I hadn't seen on the road in years. Inside the restaurant, I found a dispatcher's office, where a middle-aged woman in a polyester uniform handed me a bill of lading for priority freight destined for Sunset Terminal. Highway 97, mile marker 223. "You're right on time, Patty," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Loads ready for pickup at Dock 3. The cargo appeared to be standard freight boxes and pallets wrapped in plastic sheeting. But when I tried to examine the shipping labels, the text seemed to blur and shift, making it impossible to read specific details about contents or destinations. As I was securing the load, another driver approached a man in his 60s wearing clothing that looked decades out of date. "First time running the Phantom routes?" he asked. "I'm Eddie Morrison. Been making these deliveries since 1982. Phantom routes? That's what we call them. Pickups and deliveries to places that exist in the system, but not in the regular world. You'll get used to it. Most of us have been running these loads for decades." Eddie introduced me to other drivers at the facility, men and women, who claimed to have been making similar deliveries for years, sometimes decades. They spoke about freight schedules, delivery requirements, and route conditions as if discussing normal trucking operations. But their references to dates, locations, and company names suggested they were living in different time periods. "The thing is," Eddie explained, "once you start running the Phantom routes, you can't really stop. The system keeps scheduling you for pickups. And if you don't show up, well, let's just say drivers who miss their assignments tend to disappear entirely." I delivered the Phantom freight to Sunset Terminal, which appeared to be another anachronistic truck stop populated by drivers from different eras. The receiving dock processed my delivery with the same efficiency I'd expect from any legitimate facility. But the paperwork I received was stamped with dates and signatures that seemed to exist outside normal time. When I returned to Devil's Backbone rest stop, my electronic logs showed detailed records of the pickup and delivery, complete with GPS tracking and timestamps. But when I called dispatch to report the completion of the assignment, Gary Hutchins insisted no such load had been scheduled. "Patty, according to our system, you've been sitting at Devil's Backbone for the past 8 hours. No pickups, no deliveries, no movement at all." Over the following months, I became a regular on the Phantom Freight Network. My electronic logs would schedule pickups at facilities that existed parallel to the normal trucking industry: truck stops, distribution centers, and terminals populated by drivers who'd been making the same impossible deliveries for years or decades. I met drivers who claimed to have been running Phantom routes since the 1970s, hauling cargo for companies that had gone out of business decades earlier. They spoke about their families, their homes, their lives before joining the Phantom network, but their stories existed in a temporal bubble separate from the passing of normal time. The most unsettling aspect was discovering that many of these drivers were people who'd been reported missing from the regular trucking industry. Wayne Collins was there, still making his deliveries 3 years after his disappearance. Maria Gonzalez continued her runs in the Phantom network, unaware that her family had been searching for her since 2021. I realized I was becoming part of the same phenomenon. My appearances in the normal world were becoming less frequent. My interactions with real dispatch more sporadic. The Phantom Freight Network was gradually claiming more of my time and attention, drawing me deeper into its parallel operations. The last time I checked my electronic logs, they showed continuous activity for the Phantom Freight Network spanning several months, with only occasional returns to Devil's Backbone rest stop. But according to the real world, I've been missing for 6 weeks. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the normal highway system through my windshield, The familiar truck stops, the regular freight operations, the drivers I used to know. But those glimpses are becoming rarer, and the phantom routes are becoming my primary reality, carrying cargo that doesn't exist, to destinations that can only be reached by drivers who've already vanished from the world they used to know. I've been driving in the same blizzard for 3 months now, following convoy instructions from truckers who froze to death in their cabs 15 years ago. My name is David Anderson, and I'm new to trucking, only been driving commercially for 8 months. Got my CDL after losing my construction job in Minneapolis. Figured the road would offer steady work and decent pay. I drive a company truck, a 2023 Freightliner Cascadia, with basic equipment and a Cobra CB radio that came with the rig. Still learning the ropes, still getting used to the isolation and the endless miles of highway stretching ahead. The CB radio is essential equipment for new drivers. Experienced truckers share road conditions, weather updates, and advice that can save you from costly mistakes or dangerous situations. Channel 19 is the standard frequency, but drivers also use other channels for convoy coordination, especially during bad weather when traveling together provides safety and mutual assistance. Frozen Fork Way Station on Highway 2 sits in the heart of North Dakota prairie, surrounded by flat wheat fields that offer no protection from the winds that sweep down from Canada. It's a mandatory stop for all commercial vehicles, but during winter months, it becomes a crucial refuge when blizzards make travel impossible. The station has basic facilities, restrooms, vending machines, and a small building where drivers can wait out severe weather. I was there on December 21st, 2024, when the worst blizzard in decades began moving across the northern plains. The National Weather Service had issued travel warnings, but I was hauling time-sensitive freight from Fargo to Minot and couldn't afford delays. My dispatcher had cleared me to continue, provided I used extreme caution and stopped if conditions became dangerous. By 8 p.m., the snow was falling heavily, and the wind was building to dangerous levels. Visibility dropped to near zero, and I could feel my truck being pushed around by gusts that had to be over 50 miles per hour. I pulled into the way station to assess conditions and decide whether to continue or wait out the storm. That's when my CB radio locked onto a frequency I'd never heard before, Channel 27, filled with coordinated chatter from what sounded like an organized convoy. Northbound convoy. This is Lead Dog, a gravelly voice announced. We've got whiteout conditions ahead at mile marker 47. Tighten up your spacing and maintain 25 miles per hour. Copy that, Lead Dog. This is Tail End Charlie, bringing up the rear. All units accounted for, nobody falling behind. This is Side Door, middle of the pack. Roads getting slick under the snow. Recommend we drop to 20 miles per hour through the valley section. The conversation continued with the kind of professional coordination I'd expect from experienced drivers managing convoy movement through hazardous conditions. But something about the voices bothered me. They had a hollow quality, as if transmitted from very far away or through atmospheric interference. I grabbed my microphone. Convoy on Channel 27. This is Rookie Driver at Frozen Fork Way Station. What's your 20 and destination? Static filled the channel for several seconds. Then Lead Dog's voice returned. Rookie Driver, you picked a bad night to be out here alone. Winds gusting to 70, visibility 0, temperature dropping to 30 below. You need to join up with us for safety. What's your location? I don't see any convoy lights from the way station. We're northbound on Highway 2, about 2 miles ahead of your position. Fall in behind Tail End Charlie when you see our rear markers. Stay close, maintain radio contact, and follow our instructions exactly. I started my engine and pulled out of the way station into the worst blizzard conditions I'd ever experienced. Snow was falling so heavily that my headlights barely penetrated 10 feet ahead, and the wind was rocking my truck violently. Following another convoy seemed like the smart choice for a rookie driver in impossible conditions. About 2 miles north of the way station, I caught sight of red taillights ahead, a line of trucks moving slowly through the storm, exactly as Lead Dog had described. I positioned myself behind what appeared to be the last truck in the convoy and matched their speed. Tail end, Charlie. This is Rookie Driver. I'm behind you now, maintaining spacing. Copy that, Rookie. Welcome to the convoy. We'll get you through this storm, but you need to follow our instructions precisely. These conditions have killed drivers before. For the next several hours, I followed the Phantom convoy through the blizzard, guided by their radio coordination and the faint glow of taillights ahead. The lead driver provided detailed navigation instructions, warning about road conditions, wind gusts, and areas where the highway became impassable. "Lead dog to all units," the voice announced around midnight. "We're approaching the valley section where we lost the Richardson brothers back in '09. Everybody maintain 15 miles per hour and watch for ice under the snow." The Richardson brothers. I'd heard that name in trucking school during safety discussions about winter driving hazards. They died in a blizzard near this location, but that was years before I started driving. As dawn approached, the storm began to subside, and I expected to see the other trucks in the convoy clearly for the first time. But as visibility improved, the taillights ahead of me faded and disappeared. I found myself alone on Highway 2, with no sign of other vehicles. I called out on Channel 27. "Lead dog, this is Rookie Driver. Where did everyone go?" "We're here, Rookie. We're always here when drivers need us. You made it through your first blizzard because you listened to experienced voices and followed convoy procedures. But I can't see your trucks. You will next time conditions get bad enough. And when that happens, you'll help guide other rookie drivers to safety, just like we helped you." Over the following weeks, I researched the history of Highway 2 and the Frozen Fork area. What I found in North Dakota Department of Transportation accident reports made my blood freeze. On December 21st, 2009, exactly 15 years before my blizzard experience, a convoy of 7 trucks had been caught in similar conditions. The drivers, including Leonard "Lead Dog" McKenzie, Charlie "Tail End" Richardson, and Mike "Side Door" Kowalski, had coordinated their movement through CB radio communications until their convoy was overwhelmed by the storm. All 7 drivers were found frozen in their cabs, their trucks positioned in a perfect convoy formation. The accident report included transcripts of their final CB communications, recorded by emergency responders monitoring the frequency. The conversations matched exactly what I'd heard on Channel 27 during my journey through the blizzard. Since that night, my CB radio automatically switches to Channel 27 whenever severe weather develops in the northern plains. I hear Lead Dog's voice, providing navigation guidance, Tail End Charlie keeping track of convoy members, Side Door reporting road conditions. And now, sometimes, I hear my own voice joining their eternal conversation, helping guide other rookie drivers through blizzards that would otherwise claim their lives. I've realized I'm no longer just following their convoy. I've become part of it. When new drivers get caught in impossible conditions on Highway 2, they hear my voice on Channel 27 providing the same guidance I received that first night. We form a chain of protection across time, dead and living drivers working together to prevent others from joining our eternal journey through the endless North Dakota winter. But sometimes, when I check my mirrors during clear weather, I can see the ghostly outlines of 6 other trucks maintaining convoy formation behind me, and I understand that I'm no longer driving toward any destination I'll ever reach.